Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Motion to approve the agenda.
So move.
Second.
Second.
And we will be reconvening the statutory board meeting to approve the levy rates for 2026. Is there a motion to entertain the superintendent's recommendations to approve those levy rates?
So.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I have a meeting, motion to adjourn. I'll get it out in a minute.
So move.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We will now call the regular, Mr. Butts, did you want to say anything?
No, you're
good. Take his
You say-
business out.
you say thank you. You made it efficient.
I would like to call the regular Board of Education, special meeting to order. And I have a motion to, accept the agenda, approve the agenda.
So move.
Second.
Sure.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? None? The motion carries, you're double checking. Monitoring items, special education update, Mr. Gillard.
President, if you want to switch the items to our,
Oh, I see.
it's up to you.
The Children's Literacy Initiative, we read. Dr. Green and Amber Hayes.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Diana Green, and the last time we were here was in the winter and it was really cold and I thought it would be warmer, but it feels almost like it did when we were here last time.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. And Amber Hayes was with me. We actually were supposed to have 3 people at last presentation, but there was a snowstorm in Chicago, and so Erica Holmes Ware is here with us today. It's indeed an honor and a pleasure to be back in Berkeley County. We're here to share the report of the literacy instructional review that we did in late January. Feel like that was last year, but it was still this year. And so again, just a little bit about Children's Literacy Initiative. Our vision is that we empower school leaders and teachers to transform instruction so that all children can become powerful readers, writers, and thinkers. And it all starts with looking at what you're doing in your classrooms. And we, again, had the great pleasure to be here earlier this year and talk to many of your leaders, your teachers, and other individuals who impact instruction. We are an organization where our expertise is to ensure that our partners are able to select high quality books and materials, that they are able to provide high quality literacy instruction to meet all the students' needs in your classrooms. We also look to sometimes provide intervention to guide school leaders and teachers for enhancing and sustaining children reading outcomes. I did not come in February by myself, and I'm a slide ahead of myself, so don't move this slide, but our entire team was not able to be here who were part of the learning walks and looking at instruction, but they were so impressed by your students. Your students in every single one of the schools were so well behaved. They engaged with us. If we asked them a question, they openly spoke to us, as well as it is very clear that your educators and leaders care about the students in Berkeley County schools. So I just wanted to make sure you knew that. If we can go to the next slide. Here are the three key levers that have to be present to ensure that core instruction can lead to student learning. Student engagement, effective in teaching, and rigorous content. Dr. Richard Elmore says, to improve student learning, you can raise the level of the content that students are taught. You can increase the skill and knowledge that teachers bring to the teaching of that content. And you can increase the levels of student active learning of that content. And according to him, that's it. I'm gonna throw a little bit something else in there. I also believe a children's literacy initiative that families do play a vital role. You can have all of that, but you also need to help their families come along with every student's literacy journey. Next slide. Here's the team that came to Berkeley County for the evaluation. Erica Holmesware, our Chief Program Officer, Mary Liss, Senior Director, Amber Hayes, Associate Director, Matt Megan, Associate Director of Leadership, and Anna Weiss, our new name, I always forget, Partner Implementation Manager. We were so excited about being here for 4 days that it was a great opportunity for us to learn as much as we could about Berkeley County. We were also present for your first weather day of the year. And so school didn't start till after 10 a.m. So on that very last day that I was here, we were only able to meet with the administrators and we weren't able to go through all classrooms. Next one. Here were the things that happened when we were here evaluating and reviewing instructional practices and curriculum. We collaborated with school and district leaders on the very first day. We met with all principals. Dr. Sachs had a principal meeting and we were able to actually get their perspective. What did they think were the strengths of their literacy instruction and what were areas of possible refinement and growth? And so we were able to examine current literacy curriculum, implementation, and instructional practices. We focused on 10 elementary, intermediate, and middle schools. So we were able to visit all 10 of those schools. We were leveraging a range of data sources as well to plan strategic next steps for literacy growth across the district. We were able to look at student work. We were able to look at iReady data to give a full picture. We wanted to talk to teachers. So we had focus groups for educators. We talked to your TISs. We talked to your AIMS. I think they're called AIMS. AIMS. And so we got a very full picture about literacy instruction in Berkeley County. Next slide. So whenever we are a part of a partnership, we have goals that we hope to attain. And once we were knee deep in information, it became apparent that there needs to be a vision for high quality literacy. What does that vision, what should it look like? And to do that, we had to look at school policies, instructional practices, and did they align to high expectation pedagogy? We reviewed and update, looking at the instructional playbook, scopes and sequence, and curriculum to ensure alignment with rigorous standards. And second, prioritize evidence-based literacy instruction that is grounded in research-based literacy practices with the National Reading Panel as well as the science of reading. We know that West Virginia has policy at the state level as it relates to the science of reading, and so our goal was to ensure are the practices and the materials, is all of that in alignment with those state policies. And so I'm going to ask Erica Holmesware to come forward. She's going to talk about the methodology, our way of work through our visit here that we had in like January.
Thank you so much, Dr. Green. We really focus on our robust data collection opportunities, and we really observe classrooms. As Dr. Green mentioned, focus groups and interviews with multiple stakeholders who engage in the work with you all. Artifacts such as student work, iReady data, multiple other data sources, as well as teacher certification and tenure review, and additional data dives that were offered to us from your leaders and educators in the building. Next slide. Thank you. And so our approach is to ensure that all of these key levers are aligned with rigorous instruction, grade level standards, and ensuring that we're able to identify both the strengths and areas of opportunity that exist across the district level, and to really be thinking about systems and structures that support the strengths that exist, as well as systems and structures that might need to be revised or edited to produce greater results. And so a little bit about what we saw. We conducted learning walks. We got the opportunity to go into classrooms and see teachers engaging with children and instruction, to see the material that children were engaging with and the work that they were producing from those lessons. And we also got the opportunity to really think about the context with the school leaders for them to provide any additional context that was needed to help tell the story of teaching and learning within the building. And so here's some things that we learned. As Dr. Green mentioned, there was high student engagement, and it was evident in every single classroom. Even for the long-term subs that were in the classrooms, there was significant instruction that was being offered to students and opportunities that existed. And while it was inconsistent, elementary children had the opportunity to engage in shared reading and mini literacy activities, which is really exciting to see for your long-term subs who were in the building. And there were promising gains in K-12 phonics and decoding instruction as well. And some of the opportunities that we noticed that were in instruction were the middle school students were not necessarily progressing and on track, like we saw in some of the younger grades. And phonological awareness continues to be an opportunity for growth and development across the district. Additionally, some of the long-term subs really needed more support in moving students beyond the instruction that they were offering to produce better results. There was also limited exposure to complex texts that were on grade level appropriate and aligned to standards, as well as an opportunity for discussion about those texts that they're engaging with in classrooms. Thank you. And so for teachers, some of the strengths that we saw were there was a great stage that was set for deeper academic engagement. Because we didn't see any behavioral challenges, any behavioral difficulties, we're like, oh, this is the groundwork for a lot of great work that opportunity exists. There were also many print-rich environments where in every classroom was beautiful. With so many opportunities for children to engage in the text around them on the walls and things of that nature. That was really exciting to be able to see. And there was some evidence of small group instruction that was present. Teachers were out here trying, they're working hard, right? And so it was really exciting to see. Some of the opportunities that existed in teacher practice was the consistency in being able to see literacy, research-based literacy practices in classrooms. And it really limited students' success in some areas that we saw. Additionally, there were foundational literacy gaps, as well as text-based discussion and rigorous instruction opportunities that were really linked to staggering student success in the classroom. So higher order thinking questions, opportunities for children to engage with the rigorous work of the standards. There were opportunities that existed there.
Before you go to the next slide, can we go back to that?
Yeah.
Because I think it would be helpful as you think about the opportunities in teacher practice. Teachers are not consistently using research-based literacy instruction.
Yeah.
Can you give the board some examples of what you would hope to see that was lacking?
Yeah.
And also, I know that we had a little bit of a debrief about maybe you hit this later, and if you do, then hold off. But the instructional materials that we've purchased for them.
Yes.
and the usage there, around there, I think we need to have a real conversation about that, just so the board is aware, but if you had that later, that's fine.
No, I think that this is actually a great opportunity to discuss, and I appreciate you bringing that into the conversation. We actually, when we were looking at some of the standards that teachers were teaching in the classroom, the materials didn't necessarily align to the standard that teachers were teaching toward. And so when we asked more questions, we actually found out that teachers have curricular materials that they actually aren't using. And there's an opportunity to investigate why and whether or not those materials are research-based, and whether or not they would support students meeting the rigor of the standards that exist in classrooms. And so, as we mentioned earlier with Dr. Elmore's text, teachers have the opportunity to really engage children in rigorous lessons and rigorous standards. If their materials don't support them in being able to do that, we can provide all of the coaching in the world for teachers and all of the support in the world for teachers, but the materials have to really meet the expectations of the standard.
Did that seem to be in like one specific area, like the elementary versus the middle versus the high, or is it equal across the board?
Across the board.
Okay.
And you had anything to add?
I would add, we were able to go into some classrooms that actually unfortunately saw the curriculum materials on a shelf.
Still packaged.
Still packaged, not opened. And so there was some inconsistency even of actually implementing the curriculum that was purchased. As well as the supplementary materials. When you supplement, being able to supplement on grade level means that you have to have a true understanding of what the rigor of the standards are asking. And so seeing a lot of students working on worksheets. Worksheets that don't necessarily align with the grade level that we were in the classroom observing. And so it varies from building to building. It also varies from grade level to grade level. One area that was prevalent with the lower grade level material was middle school. We also saw that it was most prevalent in middle school, but we also saw it in intermediate. Sprinkles within the elementary buildings, but I would say the upper grades were more prevalent when it came to the lack of complex text. Reading text that could have been in a 7th grade class, that could have been a 4th or 5th grade level. And being able to engage with that doesn't really get you to the level of depth that you would hope to see. And yeah, so it definitely sprinkles through, but one of the things that definitely stood out with our team was seeing the curriculum materials packaged. It's like, oh, this is so beautiful to see. And it was, to have all these materials where some places don't. Yeah.
Was there a particular, curriculum?
Remember which curriculum?
For middle school, it's
Oh,
study,
the middle school was.
middle school is study sync.
But the books that we saw were, I believe, Scholastic.
Yeah, and then Scholastic for the elementary.
Well, the Scholastic,
Yeah, I can buy that one.
Well, we understand why. Yes.
No, I can,
We don't wanna buy it anymore.
no. I can buy the argument that it's still sitting on the shelf.
Right.
I came too.
I'm
And
sorry.
I do want to add to that the leaders expressed to us that they felt that the professional development was highly lacking,
Okay.
especially at the middle school. You get your one day, you got a new book, they felt nothing came behind it. When teachers struggled, there was no one there to provide that support. And then we heard very clearly from the elementary, they don't like Scholastic.
Yes.
And so that's why it's sitting on the shelf.
Well, there's so much that goes into that Scholastic, answer that we didn't get the material, but I don't think in a timely manner, and then school was starting and there was no PD, and it just went on and on and on.
Yes, they were not shy, they shared.
Yeah.
So I guess my question concern is, I know we had our student scores, test scores, and many middle school students are behind 1 or 2 grade levels. So that could possibly explain why you saw 7th graders working on, because that's the level that they were at, and they're trying to get them up to 7th grade, whereas if they presented them with 7th grade work, they would be completely lost.
Yeah. That's definitely a challenge that I myself made when I was an error that I myself made when I was a teacher. And when you're first engaging children in grade level work, it feels like you're swimming in sand the first time that you're engaging in it. But it's like riding a bike, right? The more opportunities that they get to engage with complex and challenging and rigorous text, they'll rise to the occasion, but you have to set the bar for them. Yeah, and there are also other interventions that go into play, but tier one instruction has to be in place across the board, and then you have tier two and tier three that can supplement for those children who aren't necessarily on grade level. There are also research-based strategies that you can use in tier one instruction to support children who you need to bring along, who might have difficulties with the text initially, but you have to give children the opportunity to surprise you.
Thank you.
Sure. Any additional questions about?
I think that, you know, one of the things that as we dig deeper into that concept of providing grade level instruction and the exposure to that content, if we never expose them to it, then they're never gonna be able to show their proficiency in the first place. But it's almost a philosophical shift in the pedagogy.
Yeah.
In that we have to be able to raise the expectation of what our students can accomplish. Because if we love them to death, then sometimes we're gonna miss the mark. And so I do think that in what Mr. Wright was referencing is exactly right. But I think that one of the things that, from what I heard from you all, is that we need to have a philosophical shift in our expectation for learning in the classroom and what we believe that our students can accomplish.
Yeah.
So.
And give them the opportunities to continue to try, and again, one day they're gonna surprise you.
Yeah, and it's not about working harder. It's not really, it's really about making sure that we're providing the learning experiences that our students need to have and being exposed to the right materials.
It's true, the children are already working hard. When we look at some of their learning
Oh,
samples,
yeah.
the work was complete, right? They were engaged, they were on track in the classroom, and so imagine what they would be able to do with opportunities to engage with grade level text. Yeah. Any additional questions before we? Yeah.
Wait, you're not done, right?
No, I'm
Okay, I
not.
was like-
No. Because I love the discussion. You all are experts in your context and your district, and so we just hope to add shape and color to, you know, what you probably already know. I think that I did, for the leaders also, my team could not stop talking about how incredible the leadership team and the leaders were here, who are excited for support, excited to learn, are hungry and thirsty for the coaching and development. And they've really created supportive environments for teachers where they feel valued, and the children are engaged in the work that the teachers are offering. And so there's really an opportunity here to, a good stage and a good friend to build from. Also, there are many awesome systems and structures that exist here where teachers said that they have structured prep time in their schedules, that they have opportunities to collaborate for small group instruction and targeted interventions, and that doesn't exist every place. And so there's really a recipe for some greatness here, as well as principals understanding that their school communities really embrace feedback. They were asking for feedback walking along the journey, sharing their context, sharing their insights, asking questions. Hey, what do you think about this? I want to try this thing. What do you think about this? And so my team was incredibly excited to experience that from your leaders. Opportunities that existed in leadership practices were the opportunity for leaders to take off their administrative hat and to put on their instructional leadership hat, right? Which means that they have to spend the bulk of their time in classrooms, and we have to clear everything else off of their plate that doesn't support them spending the bulk of their time in classrooms, having discussions with teachers about the text that they're teaching and the standards that they're engaging in, being able to engage in the professional development that their teachers engage in, and really being able to engage in the discourse and communicate what the vision for excellent literacy instruction is, so that they breathe, eat, sleep it throughout their buildings and their engagements. And additionally, there was an uneven monitoring of feedback for instruction that teachers were getting in terms of how often teachers get feedback on instruction. For the most part. And then there was also inconsistent instructional support and follow through on different initiatives. And so there might be a training and then they try something, but do I go into classrooms? Do I see if you're trying to implement that strategy that we just learned about in that professional development? What is the through line from the vision and the concept all the way to the students? And what we actually love to say is when we go into classrooms and we see children engaging in a certain way, if we want to see children do something different, then what is the teacher doing or saying to ensure that the children do something different? Well, if we want the teacher to engage differently, then I, as the leader, have to do something differently for my teachers to engage differently. And so the through line is all the way down to the students. And so they also mentioned a lack of targeted support for LTS-led classrooms, being coaching and professional development for those staff.
Does that, the gap in leader practice, I know that one of the groups that you all, had as a stakeholder group were the aims, and specifically thinking about the targeted support for the long-term substitutes, which is the role that aims are in.
Yeah.
As well as I think even from some of the district level support folks that we've had. This year was sort of a shift in year because of the structure of staff, and we're trying to provide a structure that more supports that long-term investment in professional support. So it's not the one time, but what would you attribute the lack of the targeted support, even though we have some of those positions in place? What was your sense from your conversations in that regard?
Yeah, I'll start and then I'll have Amber add, but for us, it starts from everyone being clear about this is the vision, this is how we're getting there, this is your role, this is your responsibility, and here are the systems and structures that exist to do that, and ensuring that there's cohesion across every district, every single school, we're all aiming towards the same things, and all of our goals are aligned from the district goals to my leadership goals my goals at my school are aligned to the district goals, and my teacher goals are aligned to the school goals that are aligned to the district goals.
So in addition to that, we're actually in that same vein, not fully being utilized in the way that allows them to be able to be instructional support. They felt as though there was a lot of moments where they were thrown into things last minute, or, we have this professional learning day coming up and finding out about it, a little bit later, but not necessarily being utilized in the way that they were intended to. But again, it comes with clarity of role and being very clear from the top that this is what the expectation is, this is the approach that we're going to take to be able to then impact the learning that students are having. And you'll actually see some, not on this next slide, but you'll see some quotes that we kind of gathered from some of our focus groups, just to be able to see and actually in their language and in their words, they did not hold back. They were very open and honest during each of the focus groups, which we appreciate. The honesty and transparency is the first step in being able to impart change. And so they were frustrated with the way that they felt as though that they were living out the work that the role that they were in.
Are you referring to the teacher?
The aim.
And it's very
And that was in one focus group.
And it's very tempting when you have additional folks in your building as the school leader, you're like, oh, I have this additional set of hands who can help and support with these things. And sometimes it's all hands on deck mentality, but sometimes without the clear roles, responsibilities, and the things that we're working towards, and our clear lanes that we need to stay in, it can kind of convolute what we're working towards together. And before you know it, you have scope creep, where the scope of my work begins to creep into other areas that don't impact children and aren't my primary responsibility here at the campus.
Well, I think that starts from the principal level on down. I mean, when they're overwhelmed with other things that they need to do, but yet work with their teachers to ensure that they're doing what they are supposed to do. And then everyone feels a lack of support.
Yeah, absolutely. You remind me of a leader that I was coaching in St. Charles, Louisiana, and we're about to do learning walks in her classroom. And she said, she got a call on her walk. She said, oh my God, there's a raccoon in the parking lot and I have to go take care of this raccoon. It's like, yes, that is a fire, right? But do you have to be the person that puts that out? Or is there someone on your team that can support you with that thing? And there are a number of different fires that come up for a school leader in any building, right? And so their first line is, I have this problem that I have to solve. But the question is, how are you allocating your time, your money, and your people to all work towards a common mission and vision? And who else can I delegate to take care of that? Because I'm now focused on children and instruction.
I think, and don't think this the one.
I promise I won't.
All that sounds good.
Yeah.
But when actuality, and when you get into that school level, it's just the.
It's real life.
And it's
Yeah.
real life, and sometimes it doesn't work out that way.
For sure, and it takes practice, just like we're expecting children to engage, right? They have to have the opportunity to engage. One of the activities that we love to do with school leaders is, let's take a look at your calendar and how you have spent your time. First of all, what matters most to you? What is your primary focus? And they're gonna say always student achievement, right? And supporting children in classrooms. Now, let's take a look at your schedule. Let's check next or highlight all of the activities that you have done that have improved instruction. And it's an eye-opening experience for a lot of leaders, right? But that's the initial conversation that supports them with beginning to think, well, how can I spend more time in classrooms? And that could be the top of my 30 minutes every day. I visit these 2 teachers and these 2 teachers on Wednesday, right? But there are clear, small baby steps that you can take that can build on one another, that can shift your practice also, because it has to start with myself. I have to say, I have to do something different. And you have to also believe, while I'm resource constrained, I do have everything that I need at my disposal. I have a phenomenal team. I have phenomenal leaders here who can support me in this work. And I don't have to figure it all out myself either. Let's come to the table and talk about what hurdles we have in our way and how we're gonna work to overcome them.
I will also add, we lean into what's comfortable and what's familiar, right? And so if, in most cases, as a school leader, you don't always come from the background of the school that you're leading. And so you lean into what's comfortable, and sometimes what's comfortable and what feels safe are those administrative duties versus the instructional duties. We heard in some of our intakes, we always start off the learning walk with just like, let's sit down. From the seat that you sit in, tell us about the school. You know, tell us about some of the areas that are strengths and highlights that you feel passionate about, and some of those areas that are a little bit thorny. And we had some leaders like openly say, you know, I was this teacher, and so going into this, I mean, I'm hoping that you can tell me what it is that we're supposed to be looking for. And so it comes also not necessarily in malice, but also there's a world in which professional development and training doesn't stop just at the teacher level, because if we expect leaders to provide professional learning, professional development without the context or without the expertise, it kind of creates this cycle. And so the support that they need is also something that needs to be considered in order to be able to then trickle down and become that instructional leader. So I just wanted to name that as well. But yes, it's always a balancing of the skills of how to be instructional versus how to also make sure that the building continues to stay functioning.
Question.
Yeah.
We are organized, you visit a third of the schools, say about now it'd be helpful to know which third of the schools you visited.
Yeah, that was one of my questions, which.
They were all Title I schools, because that was the funding source that we had for to lead this work. So it was all Title I schools, but we can provide you the list of schools. Actually, they didn't get a report. I'm not sure if there's a report or not.
The full report.
My follow-up question is, you visited 3 levels, and I sometimes wonder if we're so fragmented in our levels that we fail to see the whole picture of the student. We're focused on a grade as opposed to a development over time. And did you notice that in our, the sort of conversation between primary and intermediate students having to adapt to a new school when they transition from the primary school to the intermediate? You have a lot of experience visiting a lot of schools. West Virginia ranks last. You're seeing other school systems which are functioning at a higher level. I know we can't go into that, that'll take all day, but the transition that we have in the way we're structured, did you see any pluses or minuses in that?
I'll start with saying one of the things I think is incredibly important as a district who serves, elementary, middle, and intermediate schools. I think that one of my favorite activities to do is let's take a look at the A standard, right? And how the standard progresses from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, and have every single educator in the building engaged in that work. Because I have to know, if I'm a middle school teacher, I have to know where they have been, and I have to know where I'm taking them, and I also have to know where they're going to go, right? And so often we see, as you mentioned, fragmented professional development, where I don't really get to connect with the middle school teacher. I don't really get to connect, if I'm a middle school teacher, I don't get to connect with the high school teachers, right? And think about learning on a holistic level. But we should be operating under one common mission and one common vision for literacy instruction. And the systems and structures really have to be built to support us being able to communicate with one another around where we are and where we're going and what that's supposed to look like and what the expectations are. Because I think that, what we're seeing is happening is children are transitioning and they're getting to that next grade level, that next, hurdle, and they're not prepared, or they're not ready, right? And so I feel I feel challenged in feeling like I have to get them caught up and then also get them prepared to send them off. And so, yes, we do see that, but I'll let Amber speak a little bit more to what, she saw.
I would say that, again, it comes with the variance in school leadership and the variance of the school community itself. We were able to see a couple of schools that were actually feeders. And so while we may have seen the most glorious elementary building and had a conversation with that leader around, where do your students go, and then go to the next level with the intermediate level and potentially not see the same experience. And so it varies, but again, it's about common understanding and common language. And so really being very clear on here's the expectation and everyone having an understanding of what grade level looks like in their building, but also what grade level looks like where they're coming from, or where, so that they can have that same experience. Because sometimes it is a little disheartening to see, wow, this is great, this is some amazing instruction, the students are so engaged, they're getting some very high level responses, and then you go to the building that you know that they're going into, and you have the vision of like, oh my goodness, I don't know if they're going to get this same experience when they come here because of the instruction that's being provided. And so really being clear and setting the stage with leadership and getting that development and being able to build their contextual knowledge or their conceptual knowledge, both of the content, will really help them to be able to support their teachers so that there isn't a varied experience. Because what you don't want is for what naturally sometimes happens, right, is that as they continue, bless you, to grow throughout school, students begin to have a different group relationship with learning and with school experiences. But it starts with the culture and it starts with what we're engaging them in. And so being able to make sure that that is a clear standard and that the support is at the top so that everyone has a learning experience that is allowing them to think critically, to engage and learn about new things, new concepts, and know that the next year is going to just build on and not take away. And so it's not consistent everywhere. Again, we saw sampling of schools, but that can happen. As they get older, you get different types of personalities. They grow into different spaces, but then it's also a matter of how they're engaging with the learning that they're doing. We have to see them with the expertise that they come in with and being able to add on to that. And that's how you get the engagement that you would desire. But it was a very, it was just varied because we saw different buildings, but to be able to see a feeder and see where we know kiddos were going was a little bit disheartening in some spaces because we know that they were coming in with such a very strong experience from their previous school.
Do you feel that, these schools that they might have been going to that had more uncertified teachers in there played a bigger part of how the expectations?
That always play a part.
Well, we have a lot.
Yes.
Of that.
We had an opportunity to have a focus group as well with not a lot of them joined, but with a sampling of long-term subs as well, because we felt as though their experience and their lived experience that they're having as educators was very important to be able to get a holistic picture of how things were going. But I would say it still comes with inspecting what we expect. And so we're expecting something, and this is what we're saying, that this is the curriculum we're using, and this is the way that we're following these standards, but then we don't go in and actually inspect to see if it's happening. That is where you get it. So the schools where you see leaders really going in and being present and giving feedback that can actually drive change in their instruction a little bit more specifically, you'll see that, right? But if you see it where there may not be getting as much feedback, where there may not be as much content specific feedback, you're going to see that variance.
I think we also need to own, though, based upon, our conversations and what you found, is that there was also a lack of expectation given as to what I know that Dr. Green and we've talked about our non-negotiables in the classroom, but we never really articulated, this is what we expect in the first grade classroom, the second grade classroom, third grade classroom. Now we've had programs that we said, hey, we want you to meet X, Y, Z, but we've never really talked about of the standards and of the core adoptions or the supplemental adoptions, what the expectation is, so that our leaders can monitor it. And I think that that's one of the things that we have to do a better job around, is defining those expectations and those look fors, so that we know what we're inspecting. You know, we could say, you know, you have to inspect what you expect, but if we haven't clearly articulated what we're going to be inspecting,
Yeah.
then it's not really fair to the teacher either. So,
Which means that starts with Dr. Sachs. Dr. Sachs.
no, we have this, yeah, we talked about this, you're exactly right.
That you have to share the vision, because it was evident from your school leaders that they felt like there was no vision, that there was no direction for them. We understand about the playbook, but they were not bought into the playbook. And so some of them, oh, this is what we're doing. And it didn't matter, well, you know, your feeder, they're doing something different. And so the connective tissue, we've talked a lot about student, teacher, and principal. District office also plays a big role in this, and ensuring that the district office is the connective tissue, helping that communication transfer from one school to like primary to intermediate to middle school and then on to high school.
And I think that based upon your all's feedback to me, and well, don't go anywhere now. Wait a second. If you want to stay up here. But that's also where I think a large source of the frustration at the school level has been with the district level of support and guidance. And that I don't think is anything new for this board. It's been a challenge where we clearly saw that there were definitely there was some good work being done, but it was very siloed and very fragmented, and that affects the communication and the expectation in our schools. And so like I said, it's not a surprise, but we also know that that's something we have to focus on and work toward. Thank you, Dr. Gray. She enjoyed that a lot.
I'll try to defend you, but
On the next slide, we were able to gather some, we think that it's important to elevate stakeholder voice in this experience. And so we did gather some quotes that folks had offered through some of the focus interviews and the focus groups and things of that nature. And so I'll read this one. I've truly never had a training on what a reading group should look like. We've heard for years, we're gonna get somebody in here to show you. We can watch these videos. When you're watching videos, you're watching kids that are perfectly behaved and they're not doing anything wrong. And it's just that the 4 kids that are in front of you. And so I think that speaks to what you were speaking about in terms of we don't know what's expected of us necessarily.
now these comments are from this county.
They're from your people.
Yeah, I'm going to read them.
Yeah. It's hard to get lesson plans done. They'll say, well, we have PD on it. Yeah, you just told us some things for an hour and then expected us to be perfect at it. And so I think that comes with the follow through, right? The things that I learned, what's the one thing that we're expected to do in classrooms? Am I going into classrooms and monitoring that thing and giving teachers feedback on the thing that we just learned in the professional development? And then on the next quote, it says, our big struggle is around needing better PD for our role. A lot of us know that we might, what we might do in classrooms, but our caseloads is just a wide range. I have people I'm beating my head off a brick wall with, and I'm not sure how to get them to move. And that's from one of the AIMS stakeholders. So who are really craving, tell me what my role and responsibility is, because that's what I want to do to support student success.
I think that's, the aims are working. Sometimes I think they, as you said, they feel like they're beating their head.
Yeah.
We have structured POCs where they look at data and standard mastery or choose a standard and then having some kind of pre-test and then follow up. And that's built into the schedule. Next quote is, there's so much going on at my school every day. Even when we're scheduled for observations or to talk about our observations or talking about just walkthroughs or anything like that, they don't normally happen. And when they do, it's very rushed or it's like, oh, hey, so whatever. Sometimes it feels like school admin don't really want to upset anyone. And so, that feeling of not wanting to give direct feedback, not wanting to push, people are hungry for it. They want to improve, they want to get better. And so the next, when I had an I-ready diagnostic, I asked the teacher about how they started and how they progressed, or if they regressed, since I don't necessarily have access to that. And so access to data and information to be able to monitor student progress and monitor student learning.
And just to note, that's from an aide, that's from someone who would be in class supporting, and so it's important for them to be able to have access to that data to support children.
I feel that the PD we received has not been relevant. We were taught that and then given maybe 45 minutes at the end. Very little implementation or seeing what it should look like in real time. And the thing that I would offer about practice and PD, we're strong proponents of it. When we're learning some sort of targeted skill, we have to get up and practice with one another. And there's an opportunity to get feedback in that session, because you have to know what I expect to see from you when I'm coming to classrooms, and you had to have practiced it for me to have been able to give you feedback, even in a role play.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a retired teacher. And I hear our visit schools, and the teachers are doing what they call scaffolding, with students at all their levels in the building. And I mean, I can remember having students, but it seems like and we've seen the results. We have students 2 and 3 years behind. And how can you efficiently teach what I call a one-room schoolhouse, the old back when the one teacher was 8 grades? And we're going back, I think it's regressing. And with your attention and the level of focus in your travels, do you see other systems that just say, we're only going to allow this compression and we're not going to have these lower levels and whatever? I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, you remind me of the case in Berkeley, California, that we were coaching in, and there was a 7th grade classroom. And I had never seen this many kids in one classroom. I mean, like they were packed in there pretty tight. And she was supposed to teach a text that we had discussed together, and, created the question things together. And I was supposed to monitor her and give her feedback on her lesson. And she said, I just can't teach this text. It's too challenging. And so I said, well, I planned it with you. I'll teach you. I'll teach it for you, right? And she said, first, let me tell you the children who have an IEP. I said, nope, don't tell me anything, because I'm going to engage with every single child as if I know that they can engage with the text. And I promise you the first 20-25 minutes of that lesson, like I said, it felt like I was swimming in sand. My armpits started itching. I started sweating. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to pass out here. By the time we left that lesson, I had to peel the children's exit ticket out of their fingers. And I said, sweetheart, I promise you, I'm going to give you feedback on this thing. And when we walked out into the hallway, she said, into the hallway, she said, there was a group of students who've been in my classroom and they've never said one word this entire year. They had not said one word. And I could not get them to put their hand down in that lesson, right? There's so many things that we make assumptions about for our children. We don't even create the opportunities for them to do those things. And it's big-hearted, right? We love our kids. We want them to experience success. We don't want to make them feel bad. You name the litany of reasons that we engage in that way. But as Dr. Sachs said, it's a mindset shift. It's a pedagogy shift. I have to believe something different for me to behave and engage differently. And then my children will follow suit, right? And so I love telling that story because I shocked myself. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe. But I gave them feedback. I stayed there an additional 2 hours, giving every single 40-something kids feedback on their exit ticket. And I made sure that they got it before I left because it was that important to them and it mattered to me. Children will show up if you do.
And I have a question.
Yeah.
And you might not be able to answer this, but do you think we're too quick to place children under an IEP without giving them the opportunity to actually show us what they can do? And that not only comes from school systems, from parents that.
As a child, as a parent of a child who has an IEP, I'm going to be very vulnerable in saying that that's quite a possibility, right? I wouldn't know I think that each case is very different and you have to investigate each and every single case. When there isn't strong tier 1 instruction, we make a lot of assumptions about the children. when it's actually ourselves and our own practices
Right.
that impact children's learning. And so if I saw excellent tier one instruction and then I saw challenges that would raise some flags for me, I would be hesitant to begin an IEP process on a child that I don't have a classroom that would have excellent tier one instruction.
Getting three
So
blessings.
the roundabout way of answering your question.
I love it.
I'm worried about that one.
Well, and we also recognize that that's something we need to help support more of, is that strong tier one instruction.
Yeah.
And I think it's not just the responsibility of the teacher, it's all the cogs in the wheel
Very
to
true.
support that. That's the district level leadership, that's the school leadership, that's the classroom teacher.
Parents.
Yeah.
And I've had so many teachers who would look at a kiddo's IEP on like the recommendations and the things that a kiddo needs, and the teacher's like, oh, this is just good teaching. You're right, it is. Oh, in the past, we would take turns attending the instructional meetings because we grew this year. They were like, no, we need you in building. So none of us go to the instructional meetings anymore, which to me is a key piece of being able to hear exactly what principals are talking about. I know that we need to be in the building to support teachers, but there's a balance for us knowing those specific things that are happening so that we can better do our job. This is another Ames stakeholder. And so I think our biggest struggle is not having books in these kids' hands. Put it on the shelf, no I'm kidding. We constantly hear people in the county say, we want kids reading grade level text, but the curriculum we have provides us with one rich text that features reading. And yes, we can read that over and over, but it's not the same as children reading it for children reading it, or the children engaging in it, or the children doing something with that text each day. And so teachers want to engage children with rigorous grade level appropriate text, and they want to ensure they have access to it. It was pretty difficult for us to be able to see whether the texts that were sitting on those shelves were research based and met the level of the standards because they just didn't have them, and so we didn't have access to them. They keep on cutting the supports that we had and spreading them thin, but this is not going away. The need is just growing. The need is not going away. Our numbers might not look high, but for us, they are. Some of the schools have a lot more support for their EL students than we do. And then I sit on a TLC meeting, which is where they discuss the iReady data, and so that's a board office member. Sometimes an academic coach for the county, our principals, and then the teachers rotate through. And we discuss their data in ways that we can help improve and support it.
So we heard a lot about what we saw, what we heard, what we were able to look at. And so we took that information, those data points, to be able to identify some priority areas, which we like to call them big rocks. And so one of the first big rocks that came from the preponderance of information that we received was that targeted professional development is necessary. And so we identified that as big rock number one, with a goal of building teacher and principal capacity in evidence-based literacy instruction and leadership. You might have the report in front of you, but the full report, when you see solution number 6, we kind of go a little bit more in depth within the report around what that means, but that could look like implementing job-embedded professional development, or coaching cycles and leadership training for the principal.
And this is to Dr. Six.
Hit me with it.
Do people go to the mountaintop and come back with a stone tablet? How is professional development developed?
Well, I think that it has been somewhat reactionary and not proactive. Again, I go back to the whole reason that I wanted to be able to restructure the instructional side, the instructional and leadership side of Berkeley County Schools, because we had, several different departments that were sort of all doing their own thing in professional development, and it wasn't really aligned under our strategic plan and what our needs assessment was. And so what we're trying to accomplish now is through our needs assessment, this is part of our needs assessment, is identifying what we need to work on, and then to be proactive in developing a very comprehensive training plan or professional development plan for teachers, teacher leaders, school leaders, and then I think the other missing mark has been our district leaders. I don't know that our district leaders, and when I talk about district leaders, I'm not talking about just, executive directors or directors. I'm also talking about folks like our AIMS, because many times those folks have come either straight from the school or straight from the classroom, and they have to have capacity in being able to provide high quality professional development, because sometimes that's a little bit different than the instruction you provide in the classroom. How do you support adult learners? How do you support the process of embedded professional development? And so we have really not done a strong job at that. And I also think that sometimes what I have noticed is that what we've fallen into is that when we plan it, it's really, really good. But then when you have those speed bumps, it either stops or there's not adjustments made to improve it. And I think we have to become a little bit more flexible and respond to some of our folks when there is a challenge.
Yeah,
Literally, I was in a meeting today and we were talking about the implementation of a plan for, actually it was for our credit recovery. And we had tried a plan, but we had some hiccups, and so we just evacuated it. We still knew we had an issue with credit recovery, but when we tried the first attempt to fix it, it fell short. So instead of going back and saying, well, why did it fall short? We just sort of stopped. And unfortunately, well, within the past 2 years, yes. And instead of the folks that needed to be in the know that it wasn't working and making a decision, it just sort of fell apart. And so, so it's been fragmented and it needs to be much more cohesive. And that's one of the reasons why I've structured things in some of this restructuring, so we can have a focus on really making sure that the professional development that is, again, for all of these different levels, from literally from the board office to the classroom, is strong, is methodical, and it's rooted in our specific goals and our strategic plan.
I can remember as a youngster, somehow the school got castor oil. So we all lined up and got a dose of castor oil. And I just remember the taste of castor oil, but I'm just sitting there
And.
listening,
Story time perfect. It's
do
fun.
we customize the professional development for the schools with the dips? I don't mean negatively.
Mhm.
So, yeah, so
We're not making everyone take castor oil.
we attempted this year, under the structure we had, to tier our schools based upon their assessment results, and any other, whether it be assessment results, attendance, what have you. So we had tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 schools. So our tier 3 schools received much more intensive support. I think we're probably where we need to improve upon that is that we had intensive support, but we didn't have, I would say, targeted professional development for those schools. And that's part of what I think we need to shift for next year. And I think what you'll also find from the folks of CLI is part of this initial work that they're doing. They're working with district leadership to help identify the means and the ways in which we can provide the architecture, the structure behind what it is that we're going to establish and how we're going to support it through professional development and monitoring. So that's a good question.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Minus the castor oil.
So the second big right that we identified was enhancing data use and communication. While there is data, we know that they're using iRate, we know that they're using iExcel, and looking at state assessment data, actually being able, taking that data and making it actionable. And so within this big rock, the goal would be to be able to make that data actionable for teachers and leaders to be able to actually drive instruction, so that you don't have teachers in focus groups saying, well, I have all these kids in front of me and I really don't know what it is that I'm supposed to do with them. Well, maybe the data says that they shouldn't be in the same group, and being able to actually use that to make your decisions instructionally. And then the last one, big rock number 3, is equitable resource allocation. And so when we talk about resources, we don't mean just the curricular materials. We also mean human resources. We have AIMS, we have TISs, because that's the acronym that I followed this entire process, and I can't unlearn it, that are ready and willing to jump in. Maybe not equitably, right? Maybe there are some schools that have more access or more frequent access to one versus another school who does not, for whatever reason. And so being able to really ensure that both human resources as well as the tangible resources that are needed for students to be successful are spread across equitably in order for them to be able to have that. And so the goal would be to have specifically high need schools, which is, I mean, we kind of focused in on that area, receive the resources and the support that they need to be able to close those literacy gaps.
And back to your comment around, you're right, everyone doesn't get castor oil. Somebody gets castor oil, somebody gets ginger ale, and a sleeve of saltines, right?
And it's tiered, right? And that's the goal, is to be able to make sure that whatever that looks like, whatever that need is, that all of the needs are being met across, and whether that be, again, I need to have these books, or I need access to more of these materials, or actually we need a person to come here, being able to look at what that looks like across. And so for each of those big rocks, we decided to set out very clear actions that central office can do to be able to, as strategies to implement those rocks. And so big rock number one was targeted professional development. We talked about all of these organically. I'm not going to go through each one, but we know that that is really looking specifically at the scope of PD that is provided around literacy and content mastery. Being able to ensure that teacher coaching and modeling is happening, and that teacher coaching is the piece. We can give feedback. We can say, I want you to do this, but if you don't tell me how to do it, is it going to actually get implemented? And so that's where the coaching piece comes in, to be able to help actually take the feedback and implement it. Creating instructional leaders. And so when we say that, again, we talked about principals wearing multiple hats, but if for whatever reason there is not the ability at the county level to have whole county professional development, well, we have structures in place, we have PLCs, we have all these common planning times. How can we leverage the principals to be able to also be the ones who are implementing that professional development? In being in classroom, you can't really, again, we can say this as many times, but it's very hard to support teachers and see change in students if we're not in classrooms and actually being present and looking and observing instruction.
Can I ask Dr. Saxon? How are we selecting our professional development?
Well, I think it depends upon what the professional development is.
Well, that's.
So, what I mean is that, if we're talking about, for example, ELA,
Yeah.
then, it's gonna be tied to the resources that we've already established. So I should say what it should be. So for example, if Scholastic is our core adoption, then we should be providing professional development around how to use that resource. And then as we identify through our school-based data team, the instructional data teams, our own district data reflection, that we have specific holes in the curriculum, then and gaps in specific learning, then we need to provide targeted professional development for our staff around that area. So as an example, in years past, prior to my time, we identified that one of the areas of weakness at the elementary level was phonics instruction. So there was an investment in UFly. And so there has been, training and support around how to implement UFly. I don't know that there has been clear expectations as to the usage. Maybe there has. I can't speak to that right now, but that's how we target professional development as an example. If we see that teachers are struggling around providing instructional strategies or support mechanisms for our L students, then we're going to provide training and support for teachers who have L students. So I think it becomes part of the process of identifying what professional development we're going to offer comes from, I think, intentional data reflection, but it's looking at the data that matters. And sometimes I don't know that we're always looking at the right data, and so we need to be able to have the focus on what data matters to target the right types of professional development. The other thing is it's really important to me is that we get feedback from our teachers and our principals or whomever it may be that we're trying to target professional development for, as to what is it that they feel they need support in. And so it's taking a holistic look at the different areas where we have to make those decisions.
I also think it needs to be done in a timely manner, you know. After the fact, when you started in a curriculum, then we're gonna do PE.
Well, for example, with Scholastic, I think that what has happened with that core adoption is that it was adopted, 6 years ago? And there were clearly some issues with the rollout, but then what happened was the district has never invested back into making sure that our new teachers, I mean, you think about your teacher turnover rate at different schools.
I think
You know,
that's a big issue.
It is, and so if we don't have the support mechanisms in to be able to provide the embedded professional development teachers need for those resources, those resource allocations, then we really struggle. And so that, as an example, in the current structure we had one math person for K-12, and we had one literacy, and that was only for elementary. And so, again, I think that it was very difficult to triage or to support K-12 professional development in just dealing math as an example. And that's one of the other things that, again, Mr. Murphy had asked a question about, do you provide the same level of support for every school? If you think about some of the restructuring conversations we've had, it's so that we have folks that can provide that tiered support for schools based upon the needs. So those ELA and math academic specialists are the content instructional experts that can go in and help a school implement those non-negotiable, those expectations for grade level instruction. Because if a teacher is still struggling in that area, then that person is there as a coach to help coach them and to model instruction for what it would look like. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of why there's a shift in the resources from, for example, TISs to academic coaches to be able to provide that support. So yeah, schools that are used to having that constant support, there's a difference in the resource allocation in order to address how we plan to tier our schools for support, both embedded support as well as professional development support.
Something that you mentioned was data driven, right? And so when we talk about implementation strategies for Big Rock 2, which is data use and communication, aligning data with instructional strategies. You can't just look at the data and not necessarily have a toolkit a toolkit to be able to support what the growth in that data area. Being able to support data-driven leadership. And so looking at what that development looks like so that it's not just, again, looking at numbers, but understanding what those numbers mean as it relates to how instruction looks within classroom. And one big recommendation, again, I've said it already, but leveraging these PLC opportunities, because that is a gift, I will name that. Been in a lot of school districts where there is no shared time and it's not a part of the bill schedule. So to be able to see that schools have this time that's already sacred or that's already in place, how are we leveraging that to look at data? How are we leveraging principals to be able to lead those PLCs effectively, both for professional development and data dives? Some were doing that and some weren't. And so making sure that that is a constant across all buildings, but they have to be trained and they have to be developed in order to do that.
Dr. Sachs? Okay,
So good.
so we expanded the principal's contract last year. Are you doing professional development during the summer hours that they're under contract?
So that's actually part of our planning right now. And I mean, obviously, part of the summer is taken up in staffing and those sort of things. But yes, we are hoping to have several different opportunities for principal capacity building. That's part of my budget request there.
We don't know about yet.
On Big Rock number 2, kind of piggybacking, did you guys come across model schools at all in any of your
I did not have any
conversations with
interaction.
principals?
I mean, I was gonna say, I'm putting Dr. Green in the site.
Yeah, model schools was with me.
Okay.
And what was the question?
Oh, just like, if you first, like, did you interact with them? I guess follow-up would be, going forward. going forward, what would be like the best path collaborating with them? Because obviously we made a big investment with them, so that PD with principals already, how could you, I guess, at this point, yeah, collaborate with you, I guess is my question.
There are times when Ryan and I work together, when someone asks something and I just say, Ryan, you need to answer that.
Yeah.
Oh, dang, she gets a look too. Oh,
You know how many times I've seen that look?
I love it.
It's not our, I don't think it's our
Yes.
place to make that. I have an opinion, but I think that should come from Dr. Sapp.
Yeah, and I would be happy to, I'd be happy, I'm working through that a little bit. I would say that, you know, when I was looking at this, and some of the big rocks, actually, make sure I'm at the right section here. The principal-led instructional development, the job embedded principal coaching with expert mentors as an example. You know, I think that the year one of the model schools contract, where they were individually with schools and they were able to do, I would say, those mentor walks with those individual principals, I think it was much more impactful for our principals. And that was obviously a much bigger contract. This past year, I think that, where we've done the cohort model, it has been much less effective in the feedback from principals. Not all principals may agree with me there, but I think that because the cohorts were not all, grade span centered, and I also think that some of what they were focusing on, what model schools have been focusing on, has not been where the big rocks that we're seeing problems with literacy, with grade level standards. They focused on engagement, they focused on teacher conversations for feedback in those walkthroughs. But I don't know that the professional development in that mentoring has gotten to the, I'm gonna say, the rigor or the level that it needs to occur in order to see what I would call instructional change. I think you're seeing maybe a change in how we conduct our walks and what we're looking for in the classroom from a high level, but getting into the real nuts and bolts of, are our teachers teaching the grade level standards? Are our teachers using the resources that we've invested in as a district? I don't know that has really occurred. And I also think that because some of that is because I think of the cohort model this year. And I also think that one of the things that are being craved is that type of support also occurring so that our teachers know what's going on. Our teachers understand what it is that our principals are looking for. And I don't know that has been effective. We haven't effectively supported that for our teachers. And so I think that whatever we do, whether it be with model schools or any other partner, would be that I would like to see us focus on several different things. And depending upon what the resources are, we do that. I think we have to be able to support teacher level support in understanding what it is that we're looking for and them being able to flesh out like exactly where their strengths are in the school and where their weaknesses are around instruction, so that there's ownership. And I don't think you have to do that school wide. I think you have teacher leaders that help facilitate that, and then they're able to share that with their colleagues. And then I also think that we have to be able to coach up the people that are coaching, our internal staff that we have, our AIMS, our academic specialists. I think we have to find a way to make sure that we have supported their efforts in being able to go out and support our schools. Because I don't think we can afford to have a consultant or a partner go out to all these schools to provide that support. We have to be able to make sure that just like with, model school said this before, we're trying to work ourselves out of a job with our principals. I think that there have probably been some opportunity that we have to be able to take a reflective look at. I don't know about top of the circles there, but that's, I mean, I think there's definitely some areas for improvement that we need to work on.
One of the concerns I heard from parent principals, that particular issue was that we were focused, they kept focusing on principals, but the principals felt it needed to come down to the level of working with the teachers, and they hadn't gotten there. That's what I heard.
And I think that if we were to continue with that support mechanism, that I would actually like to see us move down to the teacher leadership level, and I think go a little smaller, and let's see if we can't have some pockets of success with it before we would ever make it larger scale.
I'm sorry, this has turned into a board conversation.
That's why I gave it over to.
It's part of the conversation.
I didn't know if you had a different perspective, if you wanted to share or not, but I definitely understand what you're.
So my perspective is that model schools is very broad in their focus with principals. It's almost, it's just leadership. And what we observed and what we heard from your educators, the AIMS, the TISs, is that it now needs to be more strategically focused to starting with the vision, what are the expectations? And now they also need that same level of content support. One of the administrators told me, I don't know what scaffolding is. And so how do you want me to go lead this PLC? And I, said, well, if you've not been provided professional development, then you're right. How can I expect you to do that? And they felt, so, it was very clear, most of them was sitting there, they weren't saying anything like in a vacuum. It was just very clear, model schools have just been focused on leadership.
Yeah.
Now, that leadership has to go from not just the principal, because this was an assistant principal who spoke to me, that they need support. Because.
And we have, I will tell you, we have done, and Lewis and I'm sorry, Mr. Mullinax and Mrs. Butner, they agree, and that's actually something that we've started putting together a plan for, is that we have not been coaching up our assistant principals in instructional leadership. And we are really missing the mark there. It's like, there's a huge gap. So,
But that person's leading a PLC. So,
That's a little scary.
because it's been delegated.
yeah, it's been delegated, you lead this PLC, and I'm sure when we spoke to those educators, they were like, well, this really doesn't even address what I'm facing in my classroom. And so it's all about, you first have to start with the vision, what are the expectations? And then you can't give people expectations if you don't give them the support to rise to the occasion. Very much like what Erica said, that we have to let students practice. Administrators are no different. Adults need to practice, and then believe it or not, they will rise to the occasion.
I have a question. So I'm gonna go down this rabbit hole. Sorry. If you have an assistant principal who's telling you that they have no idea what scaffolding is, but they're not raising their hand and telling their superiors or whoever delegated them to be the PLC leader for that day, what does that tell us about safe places for our staff to go to raise their hand and say, I don't know what to do?
Well, I do want to say,
So I'm
her
asking
principal
questions.
was there.
Okay,
So she did not say this
Okay.
privately to me.
but my question becomes, how many of our staff are scared
Well,
to say
I
a
don't think
word?
it has
What's
anything.
his-
I'm asking a
I don't
question.
know, I'm gonna ask another.
I don't think it has a lot to do with being scared.
Well,
Scared or, well, okay,
You mean
let's,
scared to
let's,
ask a question?
Vulnerability.
no, vulnerability.
Oh.
Being vulnerable, being able to say, I don't know this part, or being able to go to their superiors and go, I was never taught this, so I don't feel comfortable doing this.
I think that what I would say is that, I personally have not found any of our staff, from my interactions in this,
Mhm.
since July, to not feel comfortable by saying,
Okay.
here's what I don't
Okay.
know. I think that
It's a-
because we
it's a
haven't
hard question.
focused on these things,
Right,
they haven't known or
Okay.
needed to feel like they need to know what this was about, because they never had conversations around it. And I'll give you an example, if you've been a non-core teacher,
agree with that.
and if you've been a non-core teacher and you haven't had this type of professional development in the past, and you become an administrator because of your work ethic and your, from whatever reason, and you've never had that, I'll give you an example. I was a CTE teacher. I was an ag teacher. You know, when it came to learning about these things, I mean, I will tell you that it was because of the professional development and the coaching that I had throughout my career. It was never anything that I got from college or university, I'm just telling you.
That's what I was.
But,
So, oh, it was, oh, listen, did you see that? She just took ownership in
I
something.
took ownership.
But what I'm saying is that I think that they're okay to be vulnerable. I think that we have safe places to say, hey, I need help in this. And they have also, I have to commend them, they have been, very receptive.
okay,
So when we make a
That's good.
suggestion, they're like, yeah, well, yeah, okay, we'll try that.
okay.
Now, I do think that sometimes they get overwhelmed because of all that they have on their plates and they say, well, I have to do this now or learn this. But it's because we're trying to shift that mindset from school principal to school instructional leader, so.
No, I agree with what Ms. Howard said, that if you've been in an environment where you feel vulnerable with the expression weakness, then you're gonna be reluctant to ask for help because it'll reflect upon your evaluation. And so, there's a lot of people between Dr. Sachs and assistant principals. And so the relationship that he tries to establish, he must instill in his subordinates at this level that to ask a question or to express a weakness is not a weakness. You have to
Correct.
address the problem, you have to acknowledge the problem in order to address the problem.
Yes, sir.
But the thing is, that's true, but I think in a lot of cases, sometimes, depending on the person. Some people, regardless of if you tell them that or not, they won't do that. If you on my job, they'll come to me and ask me a question, they are not going to my boss. Because they don't want the boss to know, I don't know this, and I do the same thing, I'm like, maybe I should know this, let me ask my coworker, and they give me the answer, okay, I'm good. But I won't bring it up to my boss, that I don't.
Yeah.
So it all depends on the person, some people are scared, some people are exactly what Ms. Parr said, so it can vary. as to what's going on.
It does, I guess the other thing is too, if we are aware, and maybe it's through this that we're becoming aware, and that's totally fine. If we are becoming aware, either before or after, that someone has not gone through ED that would help facilitate their understanding and ability, how are we asking them to lead it? I'm just putting that out there,
Well, I think that,
I don't know that you'd be asking them to leave it.
but they were.
well, I think that we want
were
them to help
asked.
facilitate conversations, and I think that, it's about this continuous growth mindset. I think that,
Right,
and
okay.
it's also about saying, well, here is where our resources are allocated. This is what we have to from our human capital to our curriculum capital, that this is what we have, and we need to be able to plan how we're gonna utilize it the best way possible. And that's supporting people that are in their current roles in the best way we can, so.
I do want to add that this, some context around the comment was about, as I came to Mr. Sachs, they feel that the district leadership is not providing them
Okay,
the right professional development.
okay.
And that was just an example.
I know.
suppose.
To give you history, a couple of years ago, the board had asked principals in our county to give us an unvarnished look into their life as a principal. And they were very candid with what they told us. It was totally anonymous, which was wonderful. But I think it's from that we are trying to like remove the rose-colored lenses from our own eyes to see what really is happening. Because the only way that we can effectually make lives better for our staff is if we totally understand it. And then we can help make good decisions with, Dr. Sachs, of course, this is, his first year with us, so he's done a lot of changes already. And continues to make them, which is not bad, it's good.
I do agree with what Mr. Wright said. Some individuals will never go to their administrator and say, "Oh, I don't know this," or "Can you help me?" But then somebody else might go to that administrator and say, "Did you know that?" And then if that administrator then goes to them, I've had this told to me, And the administrator says, why didn't you tell me that? Well, you know, they don't want that an individual, the administrator to know that they don't know, but there's no harm in that. That's how they're gonna learn. And so I don't fault any of them for that.
I'm not either.
And sometimes you don't know what you don't know
That's
until
what
you
I
really
just said.
know
They
it.
don't know.
Yeah. That's an opportunity, right? When you're in a space, where you're having discussion after going into a classroom, where you're having discussion to give insight and something sparks like, oh, wait, I actually don't know that, but I've been doing this. There's also a role when we think about literacy where our undergraduate programs do not always push the science of reading. And so I thought I was going to change the world my first year in teaching. I went in and had first graders, 28 of them looking at me. I had some that never went to kindergarten. I had some that were well above grade level. I was teaching some how to read and some how to even identify a letter. Well, I wasn't prepared to do that. I thought I was going to change the world. I had to get a master's in reading in order to do that. And so everybody, number one, does not have the time, the desire, the finances, the capacity, whatever the case is, to do that. And so that's how we kind of ended up at Big Rock number one, is because we heard this trend, sorry that there's three, but one was targeted professional development. We heard a constant trend of wanting to know more. It wasn't just at the teacher level. It wasn't just at the principal level. It was at the aim, the statistics. There was a level in which the way that learning happens and the way that teaching is done changes over time. I'm not a math person, that's why I'm with literacy, but new math is something, right? Like, I learned it this way, so I'm gonna teach it that way. Well, that's not the way that they're going to be assessed on it. Same thing happens with literacy. We see the research constantly changing around the science of how students learn, how they acquire this knowledge and how they apply it. And if no one is teaching the teachers how to do that, it's not even their own fault. Right, and so that's where that Big Rock came from, is it was a resounding, we need this, we want to know more. And so until we are able to give them that, even down to what scaffolding is, we can't expect anything different. What I will say is that our focus groups and even our one-on-one conversations were very fruitful. They did not hold back, so it doesn't seem as though, as a stranger, they weren't afraid to tell us anything, so I can't imagine how it would be any different when they're, you know, in their individual spaces, to be able to speak up about what they enjoy, but also to be able to vocalize what they need. And so we really use that to ground the recommendations and the support that we're providing, or that we're providing with, I'll show you the next step after this. So Big Rock number 3, we talked about, again, resources, making sure that it's not just addressing the disparities in the actual resource distribution. But one thing that I want to name, and I'm going to name again because it came up a lot, curriculum. The HQIM, high quality instructional materials, is something that is going to need to be a big priority. Scholastic, while it has been in place, is, we know, not being utilized consistently. We also know that supplemental curriculum such as Heritage and UFly had to be put in place because Scholastic was not covering things and instructing as it relates to the rigorous standards. And so if you want to see change, not only do you have to provide professional development, you have to give tools. And so this is going to be a very big one that is a strategy to be able to make sure that you're seeing that.
When do we change that?
Scholastic?
5 or 6 years.
Oh, yeah, we're up for
2
adoption.
years.
No, we have one more year and then adoption for 27.
We have,
Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
Next year is driver's ed and health and wellness. And then the following is, but we're doing some, Dr. Sachs has allowed us to do some piloting here, so we're gonna make sure that we've got, we're
trying to get ahead of the curve.
I was gonna say, I don't like having to wait 2
And
years
advance,
to change this out, that's kind of stupid.
And you know,
What's this commercial?
one of the things we can celebrate is that we do, Dr. Sachs is asking a majority of us to take the letters training. We had 60 people take it the first time on group 1, and we have over 50 people sign up for the second, group 2 that'll be going through. It's very, very eye-opening, and it shares with you a lot of the reasons why some of us, and I'll say this, our teachers select, and why we selected Scholastic in the first place. But honestly, I was gonna say, it's not faulting our teachers, it is that lack of knowledge. And so once you gain that knowledge, once you know better, you do better, right? So there you go. I'm learning myself in that. And so when we're looking at these new curriculums, we truly are looking at, even today, I met with one of the companies to say, show me where this is at. How do you develop this? Tell me about the graphics. What are they, you're educated on what you can ask for. So I think we are at a good place right now. As long as our teachers get educated and if we get those individuals in to make the next selection for the next series, I think we'll adopt something that will be very, very beneficial.
And what feels really incredible about that is the work that you're embarking on now, right?
Yeah.
Because this is laying the groundwork for being able to adopt that exceptional curriculum that is research-based and high quality.
I'm not too, that we don't want hearing what you have to say, but maybe we could. And it's us, it's not you, so.
I was trying to wait it out. Okay, so I don't want to leave this part out. After we kind of gone through, we've done the same review of findings with the district team. And so one of the things that we engaged in was a side-by-side action planning. What could this look like? Or starting the process. And so we looked at a couple of different things. Again, the goal is sustainability, the goal is change. And so we looked at the NASTR model for change management and reflected on, and I'll show you all what that is on the next slide. We also engaged in what we call a SHOT analysis, or you may have heard it as a SWOT analysis, where you really just take a look at strengths, hurdles, opportunities, and threats that there are as it relates to actually seeing the change that you desire to see for each of those big rocks. And then we just co-created a theory of action for each one. And where we left off was being able to take all of those pieces and start thinking about what the action is, what actions, because it's not just one, the actions that are necessary, the stakeholders that are necessary, the timeline that's necessary, and the resources to be able to see the change that you want. So when I talk about the NASTR model, this is a model that supports complex change. And so we looked at this, you'll see it says vision, consensus, skills, incentives, resources, and the action plan equals success. When any of those pieces are missing, it leads to the things that you see on the end. You'll have confusion, you'll have sabotage, anxiety, resistance. And so we used this to really look at where we were as it relates to literacy and what we're seeing in classrooms. So if you're seeing frustration, there's resources missing, right? If you're seeing that there is, I don't know, my words are leaving me, but you get the point, right? And so we use this to be able to really look at where things were as it relates to from the seat that we sit in. And so then we went through and each group, this is a lot, I'm not reading any of this to you, you have the slides in front of you, but wanted to, again, with the lens of those three big rocks, really have a critical lens or reflect on current successes. What are some of those weaknesses or hurdles? What are opportunities that we can leverage to see success? And what are the threats that could potentially hinder being able to see change as it relates to those? And so the next few slides you'll be able to review is directly what the team says. If you notice that it's a different color, the next group that filtered in, they changed the color so that we can see it was something that they added in addition to. And so we co-created this, went through this process alongside the team. And then we were able to, on the last slide, or the next slide, start to create, based on the SHOT analysis we did, based on the reflections on the NASTR model, some theories of action that we wanted to see for each one. And I will read this. So for targeted professional development, the theory of action that was co-created was if we empower our leaders to deepen their instructional literacy knowledge and leadership skills by leveraging existing systems and structures to provide robust, relevant, and empowering professional development, then teachers will develop deep content knowledge, leading to rigorous, engaging, and grade level instruction that is meaningful and connected to students' lived experiences, so that students demonstrate growth, achieve proficiency, and take ownership of their learning. This is what we want to be true for professional development. And we did the same thing for data communication and equitable resource allocation. And from that point, the team then took that and started to create what they want a goal to be and the rationale for the goals for each of those big rocks, and started to really brain dump around what actions needed to happen, granular, high level, for each of these in order for these theories of action to actually be the so that we see. And that's where we've been spending the last, maybe few weeks. We've had a couple of calls together where we really went through this work, side by side. We've given critical feedback on some of the pieces that they brought to us. We've done some very good sharing and reflecting. And so super excited about where the team is going to take it from there. I did the fastest that I could. I hope that worked for you. Thank you all for your time.
And I didn't mean to rush.
No problem.
We could be here till, you can tell when that's going to.
No, I said, what? None of us. None of us. No, mine's for Dr. Sachs, but you go ahead.
Well, I appreciate something you put in, you went quickly through it, but under weaknesses and hurdles. You put in there buy-in, here we go again, lack of follow-through, focus will change next year. That's one of the problems we're gonna be facing. And we're trying to change this ship, is the people are constantly getting into one thing and then next year it's another thing. And I've heard it time and again from the principals on down to the.
Well, what I would say is that we're not changing anything that we have started this year. We're just expanding it and providing more intentionality behind some of the structures that we've implemented, some of the expectations that we've established. And I think that we're going to, through the work that we're going to be doing over the next several months leading up to the next school year, is we'll be clearly defining not only the things that we've expected this past year, but the additional supports and structures as well. So I don't think that there's any proverbial throwing the baby out with the bathwater and starting over on anything. I think we're just going to add to the support that we've been and the structures that we've tried to implement. And I honestly think that what this board has allowed my team and I over the last 7 months to be able to do is a step in the right direction. I think that the restructuring of our resources and our people in order to most effectively benefit what's going on in the classroom is also a piece of that pie. So I hear you, and I think that we have to be conscientious of that as well.
Mr. Wright?
You touched on my question. So my question is, after this presentation and seeing the reports, does this change any of your restructuring plans? Can't tell the plan.
No, I can't take, right, no, well, and I think there's some things I can share. I think that what you are seeing from my restructuring plans are reflective, because I met with them on the report probably a month and a half ago. And so it's all led into the why of my restructuring
It's
to
assisted.
support it. Yes.
So it's assisted.
But I wanted to make sure you all had an opportunity to hear this also, as we think about, as you all continue to consider the restructuring proposal that will be shared with you during the employee hearings and those sort of things.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Thank you all.
Thank you.
And I would just like to add one more thing, just as a context, I think, and I have said this time and time again throughout my transition, is that it's really important for us to, whatever group I'm with, it's really important for us to hear the good things and that are going on, but it's even more important to hear the things that are hard to hear sometimes. And, I will tell you that the folks that are sitting in the room here, the people that are online, our principals, our teachers, they have been relentless in working hard for our students. And so sometimes it's hard to hear where we've missed the mark, but it's also important that we hear where we're missing the mark so we know what we need to focus on. Just as Dr. Green, who, is one of her exceptional qualities is that she's a straight shooter. And it's something I always respected about her. So even as we get feedback, she's never afraid to shoot me straight and to tell me the things that are hard to hear, because it's the area we know we need to focus on. So I want to thank Dr. Green and her team.
But I do it in a nice way.
You do it with love. You do. Yes. It was funny, we sat down and as we were going over some of the planning and, I think the role was reversed. And she said, Brian, you must be really enjoying this, telling me what I need to do. Right? How I need to do this work. I said, no, Dr. Green, not at all. But thank you again for your time.
Next on the agenda, special education update, Mr. George, and team.
just want to start off by saying thank you for hearing us tonight. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you a little bit. We're going to kind of jump into this kind of a little different. Your presentation has a lot of information on all the slides, and that was done intentionally due to the fact that you all do your homework. You all want to have questions to ask, and to be able to ask my team, myself. That's why we put all that information in. So we will not be reading all slides tonight. So what I am going to tell you is that we did put this presentation together, and this is what the goals I have for you tonight is to have basic procedures or knowledge that you need around SAT, which is the student assistance team, evaluation, eligibility, and what the IEP looks like and how it's structured, and the roles and responsibilities of the people who actually sit around that table, the coordinators, the psychologists, school-based staff, parents, and especially service providers. All right, so the first topic I want to bring in is Child Fund, and that is a federal mandate that comes in through IDEA and our own West Virginia Policy 2419. So that is, we're actually looking for students that may have disabilities, so we can help structure supports for them so they can thrive in our own schools. So that is our goal, is to even get out into private schools, looking for all those special ed students that may need help, or we can help identify. So that's why we work so closely with Part 3 as well. So I'm going to start off with what a referral. Who can refer? Well, it can be a parent, it can be a medical provider, it can be a professional, it can be anyone can refer. Now, a formal request is going to be asked for, but we don't always have to evaluate, and that's something that the SAT team goes into. We'll turn it over to Kelly.
Yes.
For the SAT.
Good evening. So as Mr. Dilly was talking about the student assistance team, this is the school level team that starts looking at the needs of those students. It is based on data. And I think our previous presentation ties into this a lot. You had mentioned, are we over referring? We talk about the data. Are we making database decisions? The data teams at each school level that's reviewing the information, they're a great source of information for the student assistance team as they're considering the needs a student may have. All the people that can be on the team that participate, we want the parents, policy doesn't require it in West Virginia, but we want parents to be involved in those decisions. Admin, teachers, school counselors, referral agents in the building, school psychologists are all part of that, to really add to the conversation and to make that decision you were talking about. Is this a student that needs to be referred for special education, or are there more strategies and things that we can implement in order to help the student before? Ideally, a SAT team isn't the pathway to special education, it's hopefully a preventative. It's hopefully our last step to find a strategy or an intervention that is going to help that student. The last thing that we really want to do is identify a student with a disability. We want to make sure we've given them every opportunity to thrive before we get to that decision. But we know that sometimes we do get there. So if we do, Brian, you can go ahead to the next slide. We're looking at the evaluation processes that take place. And a lot of the people involved in that evaluation, once SAT has decided that's where we have to go, are psychologists, coordinators, our school-based teams. They all have roles in completing the assessment, gathering the assessment. Initial assessments take 80 days, and I'll talk a little bit about timelines in a couple more slides. But that initial process is an 80-day process in West Virginia. Next slide.
How many days did you say?
80. And that's from the time we get permission from the parent until we sit down at that eligibility committee meeting. That's just not for that evaluation. It's also the meeting to discuss the outcomes and next steps.
But you can start providing interventions before the end of those 80 days, is that correct?
You can.
So like,
can.
for example, if you have a child that's going through the process, and, but, I mean, could you implement, preferential seatment, obviously, you could do something like that, or, but you probably couldn't do extended time or reduce.
You can even try some of those as interventions through the SAT process,
Okay.
because a lot of those are good teaching techniques. If I know that I have a kiddo in my class that just needs a little extra time, as a good instructor, I'm gonna give them a little extra time, figure out how to work with them. But those should be done through SAT and documented if we're doing them before the actual eligibility process takes place.
Well, the reason I ask is from the perspective of a parent, 80 days is a long time, and you feel like your child needs help, and so I think that making sure, so if we are to implement those types of different strategies to help the student through the SAT process, what protocols we have in place to communicate effectively with parents that those things are being attempted and tried, so that it's not at the 80-day mark, you're meeting with the parent saying, well, we tried this and it didn't work, or, so that the parent feels included. Do we have steps in place to keep the parents up to date on where we are in the process?
So I would say it's not consistent across each school. So different schools handle it in different ways. Once they start the SAT process, we're required to advise the parents of the results of that SAT. A lot of times I'm hoping that we have to give something called a prior written notice that tells them what was discussed. We encourage schools to put what it is we're gonna try. We're not ready to make the evaluation based on data because we're seeing progress. We're gonna continue intervention and do this. I think that ongoing communication, it isn't consistent in terms of the process. The requirements are every time SAT needs to review that data, they do have to send a prior written notice home. Again, hopefully updating that information, but I would not say that there's a consistent process for that communication.
I think that's one thing that we lack, the communication with, parents in between when the process started, and, because all I hear is, well, it takes 80 days or it takes this long time, but that's a lot of time when a parent doesn't actually know what's going on in the process. Now, maybe that's just not something that I've been made aware of. Maybe the schools are doing that a lot more. I don't know, but I think that's something that we maybe need to make sure that we're a little bit more consistent on.
I think
Many
that's,
schools invite the parents to the SAT meeting, that's something that's allowed.
Yeah, I
as
hear that
well.
all the time, but
Right.
many of them don't
But-
show.
But I guess I'm gonna piggyback a little bit on what Ms. Long is saying, and ask a different question, and maybe this would help. Are parents providing any level of assessment to the SAT team?
many, I think I know what you're asking me. Many parents, if they have had, outside support for their student, if they've gone out and had medical evaluations, yes, they will
That's not what I'm
provide. Okay, then I didn't understand what you're asking.
That's okay. Are there any documents that we have that we give to the parent that says, can you evaluate your child on what your child does at home when doing any assignments that the teacher assigns for homework or activities at home for, maybe it's on winter days, where we're doing at home learning, or when they're learning a new activity with the family, or independently, because it's not just learning that happens in the school, learning does happen at home too, just different ways, different aspects. Do we have an evaluation or a questionnaire that goes home with parents so that they can feel empowered of, I'm providing an evaluation for my child that will contribute to this process?
So a couple years ago, we collaborated with Teaching and Learning and worked on establishing a parent questionnaire that is part of the SAT process that the teams can. We've trained the SAT team members on the parent questionnaire, I should say the SAT chairs. So whoever's leading that, we did some training on that a couple years ago. There is a parent questionnaire at that point in the process if they choose to use that. And then also, once a referral is made, once the team decides we do need to refer for special education, there's another parent information collection that happens, and it does talk about a lot of things at home as well.
I think that might be something that we want to think about, because I think the parent input is so important, is that we make that part of what we want to make sure we send home, we want to expect that. But I'm also thinking about, other certain services or assessments that have to be done, like the ADOS, or I'm thinking ADOS, there's another one that does require the parents' input on what the child is experiencing to determine whether or not they're gonna be identified with autism or what have you. So there's other mechanisms that I know we utilize, but for other learning disabilities that we may be, trying to go through the process on, I do think it's important we be consistent in that expectation, so.
There's screeners, a lot of times, some of the psychologists, when they're joining the student assistance team, they will get permission to do a screener. So it's not necessarily a full evaluation, but they start with some screening pieces to determine the needs. Are we seeing some of the things that are needed for, that gives the idea that there may be some additional issues or concerns that we should maybe refer for. That gets parent input, as well as once you make the referral, depending on what the referral question is, depending on what we think the concern is, then there are also other types of parent information gathering as well.
I think the snag I see in this, and I'm coming at it from a parent's perspective, is I'm losing control of my kid. I don't have control over.
You're like behaviors.
It could be behaviors, it could be their learning, it could be the way that they're identified, the way, it could be any number of things, it could be all of those things. When you have a child who you're sitting there going, I wanna help them desperately, and I know that there's an issue going on, and I want them to get evaluated, you almost feel like you're out of control. And sometimes the best way to help bring parents into it and bring them along for the ride, if you want to say it that way, is to invite them into the process. And I think that I've heard a lot from parents that said, I don't feel like I'm invited. Yeah, I go to SAT meetings. Yeah, I go to IEP meetings, but I'm told how bad my kid is. I'm told how horrible they're doing in school. And I'm not being asked, I'm being told. And I think that's the part that I think if we started this process out, where to your point, there's this asking, there's this contribution, this buying in. We just talked about that in our last presentation. If there's no buy-in, it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be like pulling teeth, and it's gonna be this continuous fight, and almost like there's this your side against my side, and there is no side except for the child.
Okay.
And we know that. And I think deep down, the parents hear that, but in that moment, when you've got a child who they're having to talk about all the ugly, for lack of a better way of phrasing it, it's not the best. You're sitting there going, I love my child, and I can't, this is hard to hear.
Sure.
So
And
how do we figure that part out?
we would say, all of us would say, the first time a parent hears that there's a concern should not have been at that SAT meeting. They should have been collaborating all the way along with the teacher, the messages, the classroom communication daily, when the concerns start, the school administration, because much of these processes, really almost all of them, these are at the classroom school level. So as we're building, that is where these things occur. And hopefully from our perspective, and what I'm hearing you say is, the parents should have known way before we even got to that first SAT meeting where they were being invited in. And it's that ongoing communication piece. And when you build as a teacher, the first call I ever made was something good. It wasn't, and I was a BD middle school teacher. It was not about a behavior. The first communications I had from go, I taught 2 doors down from Mr. Murphy. The first conversation I've ever had was about something positive. And it's that relationship building and that communication that helps us get to the point where then when I do have to say something hard to hear, like we were talking about earlier, they know that I'm all in with their kid, I'm invested. And so if I'm saying this, it's because I want you to work with me to get on top of this issue. And I think that's the communication that helps us avoid parents feeling like that.
Do we have a standard, and you might not be able to answer this is more geared towards Dr. Sachs. Do we have a standard procedure for our staff that they need to follow to provide that level of communication to parents?
You mean through the SAT process?
No, not through the SAT before we ever even get to the SAT. Like the very
I don't think that we have, well, we have some processes like on attendance that, we, you know, of an expectation of meaningful communication and contact. I don't think that we, actually, I know that we have not set any kind of district level expectation on, you know, communicating with parents on a regular basis or, you know, so many times a quarter or a semester. I think that is I do think that is a very valuable, expectation because of the importance of home to school communication. But that is not something we have tackled since I've been here yet.
Okay,
But you know, and I do know that parents and teachers communicate with,
Yeah, sure, but those, you know, they have.
there are many
Yeah.
that do.
I think majority of them do, because that's how they know that some of the problems that are happening in school are attributed to homes. And if people are listening, I don't mean that in a negative way, but you know, there are some issues with the home that when those children come to school, you know, they act out behavior wise. And that could go to an IEP.
I think that we do a really good job of, you know, well, I shouldn't say that, because I'm assuming, I should say, that I think that we probably do I don't know, so I don't want to say that this is what's going on. I think there's a trend in, public schools that at the elementary level, you have much better communication with families around the progress of their child than when you get into middle school and high school. Because there's just so many more things going on at the middle school and high school level with behaviors and class, so that their parents are relying on the report card that comes home. And really, they're not getting any kind of communication from the middle school or high school level until it's a real problem. And I think that as a public school organization, we can always find ways to communicate better around the progress of our students. But it's about time. It's about the time that it takes to be able to do that, to make it meaningful. And I think that that's where, you know, some of the resources and technology that we have with parent to class communication systems that we can have in place that it can make that more streamlined, but it just unfortunately has not been an area where we have taken a good focus on. But I do think that it's going to be part of what we're going to have to take a look at from a strategic action standpoint of improving the relationships that schools have with families, is to be able to inform them in a more meaningful way around the progress of their children.
I think though also, if we would hear something different probably from the school level as far as that communication with parents occurs. I think there's a lot more sometimes than we think there. Actually, that's my opinion.
On the earlier sheet, the ages are 3 to 21. How do we identify children, even as young as 2 years, 10 months, I understand can come in? I remember talking to the physical therapist, anyway. It's just by a doctor's recommendation of parents, because they don't have classroom teachers with 3-year-olds. They're already brought into the thing. So how do they get in?
So for preschool students, which is what you would be talking about, those referrals come from West Virginia birth to 3. A lot of these children have been involved since birth with birth to 3. And we also may have a medical provider give us a referral or tell a parent, I think you need to have your child evaluated. It could be the parent. We are required by policy to put information in doctor's offices, housing complexes, things like that. So we're required under that federal child find law that Mr. Dilley was talking about to do somewhat of a community outreach to make them aware. And then our responsibility is to determine if those children do in fact have a disability. Once they're brought to us, then we go through screening and evaluation processes.
Is the 80-day range, is that because is that like a federal standard? Is that it just takes us that long because we're understaffed in that area?
No, no,
Or
no.
like, I don't know
Okay.
what the reasoning is for 80
I
days.
am getting to that slide in one more slide. If you don't mind, I'll do them all at the same time right there.
Fine.
Okay, thank you. So, once an evaluation is completed and we're ready to present that evaluation, an eligibility committee is formed for that student. And when we review that full evaluation that's been completed, we have to determine, does the student, based on that evaluation, have a recognized disability? Does it affect their educational performance, and do they require, and this is often one of the most important pieces of this kind of three-pronged process, do they require specialized instruction to make progress? So in types of eligibility meetings, the initial eligibility is an 80-day process. IDEA, which is the federal law, which we're required to find our way underneath of that, does allow for states, it's 60 days, or you can establish your timeline within reason. So West Virginia, for as long as I've been teaching, about 24 years now, West Virginia set that at 80 days. And if you're considering another area of eligibility, then you also get 80 days to do that evaluation. If you think, I'm not sure that this student's specific learning disability that we identified 3 years ago is still their primary area that's impacting them, then you can do an evaluation because you think now you've recognized signs of, and I'm making up this scenario, but now you've recognized signs that the student may have autism, and that may be impacting them more than the learning disability that they have. So if you're changing their eligibility completely or considering it, you get 80 days to go through that process. It doesn't always take 80 days, but it can take up to 80 days. If you're doing an out of cycle reevaluation for some reason, you're not looking to change the eligibility, but something has come up that you think you need to look a little deeper into something going on, you get 60 days to complete an out of cycle evaluation. And then reevaluations happen every 3 years. So those are the timelines with those. As of March, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say the 3 years, is that federal standard?
Triennial, to do a triennial every 3 years.
Okay.
So could you have, an 80-day and a 60-day back to back?
In theory, yes, I don't know why you would. It doesn't, a lot of times, once you do an evaluation, say a kid has, an IQ test performed. Doing one within a very short amount of time after that, your results aren't always quite as reliable because they've just had an assessment. So you definitely would use a different test. So there's something called a WISC that we do IQ, there's a Woodcock-Johnson an IQ test you could do. You would definitely want to use a different measure, but the more frequently you do it when you're doing those standard evaluations, the less reliable they become because a student kind of becomes exposed to that testing and starts to give them a little advantage, not intentionally, but
Yeah.
it just happens. So far this year, we've done 1,934 evaluations and eligibility meetings out of the Office of Special Education.
Wow.
So we're hopping when it comes to eligibilities throughout the year.
What does that equate to like per day for you guys? Like,
Well, if you think you have 180 school days, where kids
I
are
don't know
in
how many
session.
of you are on staff, so that, and participating in the meeting, so I apologize.
Well, so typically, and Michelle's gonna talk a little bit about coordinators and coordinator responsibilities and the numbers that the coordinators work with. So as we go through the process, we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like and who's doing what. But it does keep you pretty busy because there's a lot of collaboration that goes into even just one meeting. A lot of the different specialists that are involved in report presentations, you want the parents there, you want the gen ed teachers, special ed teachers, the psychologist. If that student needs any kind of additional related service, occupational therapy, speech services, all of those people their schedules have to align, and sort of like getting the planets aligned sometimes. It's really challenging with so many schools and different areas of need. But these are some of the people who might be in those meetings. And we kind of went through and gave you an idea of what each person's caseload might look like if they're one of those specialists.
You have the contract there, some of these. especially-
We do.
And I
we
mean,
do.
I see the vision person had to have 6,500 minutes a month.
So that is an average of what they're looking at in terms of services for a student. So there's vision services and orientation and mobility in the area of visual impairments.
I mean, does each student, I guess they have a group of 25 students at home, we're getting that time.
That's average. It's not exact. You might have some that have a lot and some that have consult. So that's just average in terms of the amount of service.
That's 100 hours a month. Plus,
Is that 6,490 minutes per student? That can't be right.
No, it was
I'm
for
confused.
25, for
It's-
25 students, right?
It was an average between the two that we have, off of our e-docs. We track that number and basically what it is.
It's like their caseload.
Their caseload.
It's their caseload of minutes.
Okay.
Yes,
Let's say, my goodness, that's almost.
That's a lot.
yeah, it's caseload numbers. So.
When do they sleep?
So with like psychologists, with like you're about to get to, sorry, the average 80 to 100 caseload per contracted psychologist.
That is our in-house, is what I used that number when I was looking that up. That's in general about what they do every year. That's a year's worth of work.
So just one person.
Well, no, we get multiple.
We have multiple, but that's one person's,
Okay.
that's one person's set of evaluations. They may do 80 to 100 evaluations.
And the top end's usually about 100. That's what our one psychologist who she's phenomenal. She just goes through, that's report after report.
Yeah. Well,
we should have Reverend Watts working with us.
He works with the, he does not work with office of special ed, but he does work with,
Look at
People
people
services.
services, thank you. He's looking for the word.
So the psychologist, the next slide talks about the psychologist's role, what they do in those evaluations. They work very closely with the families as well. So once we get to the point of the evaluation, they are talking with the family, they are gathering information from the family. They also present the evaluation results in the meetings. They help support the eligibility decision. In West Virginia, the decision is the team's. The entire eligibility committee has to agree on the area of eligibility. In some states or some areas, it's solely this at the psychologist's discretion, what a student is going to be identified as. West Virginia's policy requires the entire eligibility committee to review the results and make that decision as a committee. They also explain what the student's strengths are, so hopefully when you get that evaluation, if the student's eligible, it's leading you into the data you need to make decisions for that student's IEP. They are able to answer questions, and then they collaborate. What should we be working toward for that student? And that takes us into the IEP itself.
Okay, so once a student's found out about special education, we have to write an IEP. So within 30 days of an eligibility decision, we have to make sure we write the IEP. We don't always take more time to write the IEP. We often, and most often, combine that IEP meeting with the eligibility meeting, because we don't want to be bringing the parents in multiple times throughout the year. Also, we already have that team all together, so it makes most sense to make those decisions as well. So who writes the IEP? Well, special education teacher or a case manager that is assigned will write the IEP. And caseloads are created at the school level. And there are some varying numbers in caseloads when you look at different teachers. So for example, A teacher that primarily serves specific learning disability may write up to 20 IEPs a year, give or take. Whereas a student serving primarily, a parent, a teacher serving students primarily with autism may write up to 12 a year. And a lot of that variability is down to the needs. Okay, there's often a lot more involved in writing an IEP for a student with autism than there is for a student with specific learning disability. Because you often are looking at functional needs, behavioural needs, there's extra documentation such as behaviour intervention plans. So although the caseloads don't always seem equal, the workload is most typical. So a special education teacher will gather information from general education teachers, related service providers, evaluations and assessments, and also parents, and create a draft. The IEP that is written prior to the meeting, really important to note that that is a draft. We use that as a starting point to start that conversation in the IEP meeting and be prepared to talk about the students' needs.
How long does it typically take a staff member to write an IEP? And I know that that can vary greatly. I understand. I'm looking for a ballpark.
That's great. A lot of factors come into play, how many IEPs you've written, the needs of the student.
I would say as a teacher, it took me an hour to 2 hours, depending upon if I knew the kid already, if I didn't know the student, if we did additional evaluations moving into it. But it took me
It
about
could
2
take you
hours.
a full week to do your whole caseload. And if you were compiling if you said you had 20 IEPs times 2 hours, just because I
For the sake of argument.
over budget. Okay, that's like a 40-hour week right there, if you just did solid IEPs all week. No instruction, no teaching, no classroom planning, no other meetings, no data looking and trying to figure out where the students are. It's literally just writing.
And it depends on the knowledge of the teacher and case manager, because we do have teachers who are not educators and probably have never seen an IEP until they came into the classroom to look. So that takes them much longer, multiple hours with a lot of support from a lot of different people.
So that would be my question, how much training does someone get in order to learn how to write an IEP?
And I'll talk about, they can talk about it, but the coordinators do a lot of training, and we have some coordinators over here. Our AIMS people have assisted with trainings as far as IEPs. They even have trainings in the evenings for teachers who want to come to learn. And then we have at the beginning of the year in the summer, large trainings. But I mean, you all may want to talk about what kind of trainings you do on a regular basis as far as writing IEPs.
Yeah, so at the beginning of every year, I would always meet with each of my schools that I had, and I would go over step by step of what to do and like what that looks like, and walk them through that. I've created resources for them as well that they could use to follow. And then my teachers always knew that if they needed help with something, I would go meet with them on their planning or before school or after school and walk them through how to write an IEP. And I've done that frequently throughout the year.
And that's in addition to new teachers that start, that are brand new, never experienced it before too. We would mid-year go ahead and provide that training as well.
And we used to have, we still have in-school mentors, and it's also for special education teachers. However, we have less and less experienced special education teachers who can help the new teachers or perm subs write the IEPs. So it is a collaborative effort among many of us.
And I offer, that's also one of the things that the speech therapists end up helping with. We write like 50 a year, so we're doing one a week. So we don't forget between your, oh, I haven't written one in 2 or 3 months, or I did it at the beginning of the year, got trained, but then I don't have to write one until
December. And so, and we're often in the buildings, and so we provide a lot of support to those new teachers who are coming and just saying like, what do I do here? Show me, you know, just that, tech support almost for having right night.
We also have a SEAT committee, which is Student Education Assistance Team. And that's involving representation from all our school buildings with administrators. Because let's face it, a lot of the time, the administrator in charge of special education in the school building is running IEP meetings. They are chairing the meeting. And that allows them to, what the SEAT committee does is monitor compliance with the statewide checklist of what's supposed to be in an IEP. But it's a good training tool for an administrator because they get to read a bunch of IEPs and evaluate them based on the tools that our coordinators evaluate them on. And it just allows them to know this is what should be here, this is what shouldn't. They can provide that feedback to teachers prior to the meeting and also during as well.
I looked ahead, you have classroom teachers will follow the IEP. How many IEPs students can a classroom teacher have? And is there a point of saturation where they're unable to do all these variations that and teach effectively at the same time?
Right, so a classroom teacher shouldn't have more than 33%.
They call it an integrated classroom in policy, and in integrated classrooms, 30%. You should not have more than 30% special education students in that classroom. And then for a co-taught classroom, no more than 50% of the students in that class should be receiving services in that area of content.
So
And that's where there's two teachers, there's a special education teacher and a general education teacher in their top classroom.
yeah, co-talk, but it's the special ed teacher there all day or do they move?
For whatever time is designated for that subject, so it just depends. And there are different models. Some districts in Jefferson County, we had the teacher follow a cohort of students who needed that support years ago. And there's pros and cons to both approaches. Now, in a lot of our schools, it just depends on the subject matter that student needs support. The administration looks at the IEPs, how they're written for support, and then when they design their schedule, they arrange the co-teaching to be placed where the student need is.
So in a class of 25, for 30%, you'd only have what, 7 students?
I'd have to get my calculator, I'm not all that strong on it, off the cuff math, I'm sorry. Thanks, guys.
That's not right.
7, 8.
You would stay at like 7, 8, you would stay under that.
I'm just wondering about the impact upon the other students. Because I know that's, I'll ask a question. And this came up in another meeting, but, you all, I know we have the idea of spare no expense. That with a school system, you have to have a balanced budget. Do you all have the pressure, I hope? I'm gonna preface this and say, yeah, I had to have to pay out of my own pocket in some fashion if I did not have a balanced budget. And my wife does not want to take our income to subsidize the public school system, other than the taxes. But do you all have a conscientious awareness of what you're putting on this paper and what the cost will be, or do you just say, forget the cost, we do what we best for the child?
Those budget items go through me, so I'm very conscientious of any expenditures that we have, even to the point that we have to look at making sure that the aid is warranted in any classroom that they need. We have to look at the needs first before, we have to meet the needs of the child. But we honestly look at anything that we buy for the child according to their disability and anything that we would want or need for in the classroom. So all that runs through me.
Squeeze the world out of the penny.
My wife would say that, yes.
Okay. So once we have a draft IEP, we move into a meeting, right? And the people or the roles you see on the board now aren't always involved in every single IEP meeting. Who is involved in every single IEP meeting is a general education teacher, special education teacher, an administrator or facilitator that chairs the meeting, and of course the parent must be invited. When a student reaches 14, or if they're 13, when their IEP is held and will be turning 14 within the IEP year, for that. They must be invited to the IEP meeting as well. And that's because we are discussing post-secondary options, life beyond high school at those times. Some of the other roles that may be invited would be related service providers. So students have occupational therapy, speech, physical therapy needs, vision needs, things we've talked about already. Those service providers are responsible for that section of the IEP and will be invited to the meeting. Psychologists, again, Mr. Ango went over what their role is, but they would be invited to a meeting if it involves eligibility and they have to interpret testing results, the testing they have provided. Coordinators, again, they monitor evaluation timelines and at most all meetings involving eligibility. They may also be included in meetings that have advocates involved. And those are occurring more and more in recent times. Special education administrators, such as ourselves, would be involved if there's legal representation or something like that. So when we present the IEP, we obviously go through the whole document, but some of the main areas that we present are on the slide now. So present levels of performance, that is a narrative description of where the student currently is in regards to their area of need, such as ELA, math, behavior, functional skills. The idea of that present level is that it articulates a gap between where they are and what the general education standard is. And from that, we create meaningful and ambitious annual goals. So where do we want this student to be within a year's time, based on the present level information we have? From the goals, that dictates services and supports and accommodations. Well, yeah. Services are the specialized instruction that we provide, and sometimes the accommodations that we provide in general education. So accommodation is a support we provide in the general education environment. All right. There's a common myth that when you're special education, you are in a different environment. Special education students are often in general education, may stay there the whole time, or may be called out for extra intervention from a special education teacher, specialized instruction. Progress monitoring, I talk about on the next slide, so I won't go over that. The transition plan, that is when we start talking about post-high school. We look at student interests, preferences, their strengths, their weaknesses, and we devise goals for employment, hopes, independent living, and education. And the point of those goals is not for us to be evaluated on whether they reach them or not, but we want to tailor their educational plan to what they want to do after high school. So when they get to high school and they're taking classes for credit, we tailor those courses they take based on their interests, preferences, and needs, and the goals they have for after high school, with the hope that we increase graduation rates and attendance and self-determination skills. Once the IEP has been presented and the IEP team has agreed, this is an open conversation between all parties. That draft comes to the meeting, can be added to, changed throughout the whole meeting. We have to implement the IEP. And we are required to meet that IEP minute for minute as it is written. So if we're saying we're giving 150 minutes of specialized instruction in a special education environment, we have to give that exact minutes, no more, no less, right? If we say we are going to give extended time in their general education math instruction, we have to prove that we've given that extended time. In the general education environment.
So take precedence over the, say, the class of 25, you have 8 IEPs. And you say you're gonna do this for these 8 students, what about the other?
That would be a teacher decision at that point. However, if one of those 8 students that you're referencing has that in their IEP, it must be given.
When you give extended time, do you have to reconvene the IEP team to, change the IEP to extend the time?
If it's not already on the IEP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. If you
If
want
it
to increase
becomes
the
something
minutes.
that student requires consistently in order to be successful, then it would need to be identified on the IEP, but we recommend specificity, not just say that generally, but what does the student really need? Do they need extra time for a particular type of assignment? Do they need extra? What do they really need? So that we're not just over applying some of these things and creating greater strain on the instructional structure of the classroom, but really what does that student need? And so we really encourage real specificity and what does it mean for that student to receive that service?
Thank you.
Progress monitoring. So part of the IEP dictates when we provide the progress reports. Most often that is quarterly when grade reports go out at the end of a quarter. And that progress report lists the IEP goals and states whether progress is being made, progress is not being made, or if they're maintaining the progress that they've already made.
Who fills with that?
Excuse me?
Who fills with that?
The special education teacher in charge of that student. And they pull from all their data sources. They know the student, they should be able to provide the progress report. But it's more than just providing a progress report, it's what we do with that information. So if we see that there is insufficient progress, our recommendation would be, well, let's hold an IEP team meeting and discuss this. How can we best support the student from here? IEPs are updated every year, but it's a misconception to say that we do one IEP meeting a year, right? If we see a problem, or if the parent sees a problem, everyone has the right to call an IEP meeting and to address those issues at any point. So as I just stated, the IEP is reviewed and updated annually. But again, it just has to be updated within 365 days of the previous IEP. We could hold 5 IEP meetings in a year if we had to, right? And all those decisions, it's based on student need. What does the student need to succeed in the classroom? If they're not succeeding, let's hold a meeting and discuss that. And as we already mentioned, a full reevaluation occurs at least every 3 years. But again, that's as warranted as well. So if we need to hold a reevaluation earlier than that, we can. And it would reset that 3-year clock on that date.
So I'm now going to talk about our coordinators and different states, different districts in West Virginia have people and staff who do things similar to our coordinators. They call them specialists. They call them supervisors sometimes. They all look different, but typically they work out of the Office of Special Ed. At this point, we have 4 elementary coordinators and 4 secondary coordinators. And then we have a coordinator, Lisa Wright, who does compliance and transition and things like that. So I'm just going to talk about what a coordinator, I'm going to break it up into elementary and secondary and what kind of things they do. And some of the numbers we were talking about numbers. I'm going to give you some numbers of things that they do. And I was a coordinator for many years prior to what I did. So I know what it looks like, but initially, just to start out, there is daily collaboration. And this collaboration is between the coordinators and Office of Special Ed Administration. Collaboration between administrators, between teachers, case managers, between related service, our secretaries at our office. Collaboration between different coordinators, because we have some coordinators who are new, some who are a little bit more seasoned, and that collaboration is very important. There's, questions bounced off each other all the time. When I first started, I remember we were at Raymer Center, and I was literally facing one of our coordinators who had been there for a very long time, and she has since retired. But I know sometimes she just wanted to go under the desk because I would be, and one more thing, and one more thing. But it's great to be able to collaborate and learn off of each other. Weekly, there's collaboration, again, with school administrators, with case managers, with related service, with nurses, with different service providers. And then weekly, daily, sometimes hourly, the coordinators have collaboration with parents and sometimes advocates who talk. So there's a lot of collaboration going on a regular basis. I'm going to be talking about elementary, giving you some numbers. Think about that 1,934 eligibilities that our office has done through March at this point. For elementary, our 4 elementary coordinators, our coordinators have between 550 and 700 students per coordinator. So what that means is they will be in their eligibility meetings. They will be in some of their IEP meetings. So again, between 550 and 700 students per each one of our coordinators. And what they do with IEPs are written. They may or may not be in the meeting. If it's just an annual meeting, they're not going to be in it, but IEPs are turned into them. They review the IEPs, they check the IEPs, they use sticky notes or whatever. If there are corrections, turn them back into the teacher/case manager, and then sometimes provide training, sometimes say, great, you got it, collective backup. As far as eligibility meetings from our elementary coordinators, each coordinator has had between 200 and 250 eligibility meetings per year per coordinator. They have to follow timelines that Kelly talked about, that Sam talked about, those 80 days, those 30 days if the IEP is not written. They participate in all these meetings, and your typical eligibility meeting typically lasts between 30 and 40 minutes. They also, for every one of those meetings, produce meeting notices, distribute them to, they need to distribute them to, with help from our secretaries, of course. Still on elementary coordinators. So in addition to all of those IEPs and eligibilities that I had said that they participate in, they additionally participate in between 25 and 30 complex IEPs. And when I say complex IEPs, I mean IEPs where perhaps an administrator called up and said, I think this one's going to be difficult, can you please come? Or there's an advocate that's going to be in this meeting, can you please come? So that is 25 to 30 in addition to their 200 to 250. Some of the duties also that they do, train staff. You heard some of the things that they do as far as training staff throughout the year. They assist with writing IEPs, again, fix errors, help with the online system. Sometimes go into the classroom, give strategies for the teachers who are having some difficulty, maybe behaviorally, or even if there's academic skills, they're really having a hard time trying to get through to a student, they will do that as well. We also have bi-monthly coordinator meetings in our office, and all of the coordinators participate in those bi-monthly. Additionally, we also have staffing meetings which start in November. I think this year we had 4 separate staffing meetings, which are typically all day long. We're looking at every single student, every single program, how many teachers, how many aides, what those students' needs are when we are looking at staffing. So those are just some of the other duties that happen. A big part of their thing is compliance. So they're looking at policy, they're looking at timelines to make sure that they are following all of this. So now I'm going to go into what secondary coordinators do. And again, we have 4 secondary coordinators, and that would be middle school and high school. Each one of our coordinators at the secondary level have between 675 and 925 students per coordinator. So what that means is between 675 and 925 IEPs are going to come across that coordinator's desk every year, because every year an IEP, we have to have a new IEP. So at some point during the year, all of those IEPs will be coming across the coordinator's desk at the secondary level, and they need to, again, check the IEP for compliance, make sure that what is written is correct, dates are correct, timelines and things like that. Each coordinator has approximately 45 special education teachers that they are interacting with throughout their schools. For elementary, let me go back to elementary, our coordinators have approximately 5 schools per coordinator. At the secondary level, they have 3 schools. Some of those coordinators have some other duties, but because there are so many students, they each have around 3, but they do have around 45 special education teachers. Let's see. They typically do between 225 and 325 eligibility meetings per coordinator. And again, they have to not just be in that meeting, they have to manage that meeting, schedule that meeting at the beginning of the year. They meet with all of their teachers because they know what eligibilities as far as reavals are going to be happening for the year. They schedule with all of their teachers and make those schedules, and they need to make sure that admin is invited, case managers at the secondary level. They can't forget the facilitators and counselors because of the PEP plans. Psychologists, advocates, nurses, and again, meeting notices and things like that are required for each one of those meetings. Secondary also, they, as all of our coordinators, follow the 80-day timeline. They coordinate with many different personnel for these meetings and just for the students in general. Additionally, they do WIAT, which is achievement testing for many of the students, and student observations. The elementary coordinators also do achievement tests and observations when needed for functional behavior assessments, achievement tests for when they're being, it's a new referral and they're testing whether it be for gifted or for something special ed. And then they attend all of the eligibility reeval meetings, which will typically last close to 60 minutes. Some of the other duties that our coordinators do is they will meet with all of their staff in August. As I said, they schedule meetings that they know they can schedule ahead of time. They compile and provide case managers with notebooks. And these notebooks are a step-by-step in what needs to be done. If you are a case manager, these are all the things you need to do. These are all the things you need to do for an IEP. So it's a real good guide for our teachers. Let's see, they schedule full days in the buildings. And again, they have 3 different schools. So many times throughout the year, they will schedule a full day. A lot of our coordinators, both elementary and secondary, will say, Wednesdays, I'm at Spring Mills Middle School. Fridays, I'm at Martinsburg High School. So they know that the case managers the administration, any staff who need to talk with them, they are there, or if there are questions. And again, they monitor the IEP completion. A lot of times they have to go and chase after people to get the IEPs if they haven't turned them in, or if they turned it in and there's a sticky note, you need to change this, and they turn it back to the teacher case manager, and then they don't get it back. So especially at the end of the year, there's a lot of going from school to school looking for things. And there's manifestation meetings, which have to do with discipline and behavior that they do attend, as well as, which I think I said, meetings when there are advocates involved. So it's a pretty daunting task. There's some pretty high numbers. It's doable. We're all here, sitting here, and
Well, and I also want to, if you'll allow me,
Sure.
the pre-K coordinators are also involved. Because we had a pre-K presentation planned previously, I don't want them to seem to be oversighted in this conversation. And so I asked David if I could add in a sheet that deals with the pre-K
so
coordinators.
while she's passing out,
Yes,
are
I
there
will email this.
any questions as
I'm
far
gonna
as?
talk about this real quick.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I wanna talk about pre-K coordinators real quick.
All right.
So I just.
Get out of my way.
I got it.
Yeah, can't fight going on right now.
Address the roles that they play, because it does look a little bit different. Every pre-K student that's identified with special needs often requires at least 2 full evaluations within a 1 to 3 year period, depending on when they enter the program. They work with Bert to 3. Many of those meetings are in the evening. They there's 2 of them, so they split the county. They work collaboratively with admin. You can see the list. I won't read it, but I felt it was really important to include this work while we also talked about the other coordinators. I collaborate with them daily. We have weekly meetings, but I just wanted to share this piece. And again, I'll email it so that you can add it to anything electronically.
How many pre-coordinators? Pre-K coordinators?
We
2.
have 2.
So there's 9, there's 8 at but there's 4 elementary, 5 or 4 secondary, there was 1 transitional, and then 2 at the pre-K level.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Now, oh, I was just, if there were any questions.
I have a question.
Okay.
We lead the state in autistic identification. I think over 400 or 405 or something. And I asked Mr. Bucks to get it now, I didn't bring my sheet, but it was, I think, about $20,000 according to the coding. For the process. Why did we, and I think we're maybe 100 above Canova County, I don't have a list with me.
So what I have found, and prior to being in administration, I was the autism and behavior coordinator. And throughout the years, as I've looked at the students who are transferring, we have a lot of students transferring in. I think we have pretty good programming. We have had some parents say we moved here because what's going on over in this county is not acceptable. Now that's not all, but the standards and assessments that we are using are the gold standard, if you will, that Kennedy Krieger, WVU down in Morgantown, WVU Behavioral Health here, because Kelly and I met with them at one point. One of those is the ADOS. We are using the same tools that everyone else is using. I don't know if it's because we have a lot of people moving in. And the levels, of course, of autism that we have are very, very different. The spectrum is very, very wide. And we have some of our students who are eligible for autism who are almost in gen ed all day long. There are others who are in special education all day long. So I think that there's a lot of different reasons for why we have so many. I think we have had parents come in and say, my child has been diagnosed by their pediatrician, they have autism, they need an IEP. And we will look and we will assess, and if they do not need an IEP for educational reasons, we will not give them an IEP. So I don't know that it's over identification of autism, because as I said, we use a very standard assessment tool that other hospitals are using, pretty reputable hospitals. Do you have?
It is, I've been around the state a little bit more than different districts. This is by far the biggest population, percentage wise of seeing students with autism. I, like Michelle said, or Ms. Foss said, we have a lot of people just coming because our housing's a little cheaper here. We've got good programming. We are known for our programs in the state. So that all kind of adds to it as well.
Well, I think what we've understood over the years that many families move here because of stricter regulations on special needs and what we can give them for services and all, especially autism.
Well, and how we service many of our students, because we are a larger county, we have classrooms that are specifically for autism. A lot of the very small counties have a multi-cat with autism, so there's a lot of different categories of eligibility in that particular classroom. And although it is doable, sometimes, especially when you have more involved children with autism, it works a lot better when you're working with them in a smaller group and then give them the opportunity to be out in the general environment to be with their peers.
But how many teachers or permanent subs that are trained as autistic teachers?
I can give you intermediate, because I was just looking at this, of all of the intermediate schools, I was looking for an advocate. We have four, was it 4 or 3? 3 or 4 certified autism teachers in all of our intermediate autism programs. And we have a lot at the intermediate level. So not all of our teachers, many of our teachers are not certified in autism.
It's one of the harder ones for us to recruit. Into.
Absolutely, yes.
Does that put more on the coordinators or?
We spend a lot more time. I was a coordinator for 15 years before I moved into administration. And the pendulum has swung, if you will, and we do spend a lot more time in classrooms supporting, observing, making suggestions at that level than maybe in previous years where we focused more on compliance and some of those pieces. We do spend a lot of time helping support classrooms and making suggestions. Of the pre-K exits we've just done recently, and we're still working on them, I want to say 53 of those students are entering kindergarten with the eligibility of autism. And we have done full evaluations for those students.
Many of them are nonverbal, to my understanding as well.
Wow.
And the legislature just, I think the governor just signed the discipline bill today.
Yes.
But-
Yes, sir.
But will these children be basically exempt from anything that
But
I don't think
it's-
so. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, I was gonna say, it depends on if it's a manifestation of their disability. That's what we have to go by when we're looking at any behavior. Is it a part of their, what causes them to do it? Is it their disability? Or is it something above and beyond? And that all has to be taken into consideration when we're looking at that.
I think we need to do a lot of planning and collaboration as well among the different departments to determine exactly what all that will look like and how we implement all of those things to provide support to the teachers, the student. So I think it'll take all of us working interdepartmentally to make those decisions.
Dr. Sachs, I didn't call the lady up, but I attended a meeting the other day at the Stubblefield Institute, and one of the presenters, I'm not gonna mention her name, but she had done and talked to you.
Actually, I think he reached out.
I actually called her. She's probably listening to our presentation.
Okay, well, I just was wondering, the title of her project was Data versus Testing to Secure Services for K-12 Students. Could you summarize her concern?
Her concern was that the eligibility of the child she was focusing on was that I believe his IEP was written around reading and ELA. And, but he was also having weaknesses in math. But according to the data that they were collecting when they would do the testing for evaluation, he was above the average of where we were supposed to, where we would identify. So therefore, that math scoring, although his scores were low, he was not meeting those special ed needs due to that eligibility criteria.
That's what I remember from that.
Yeah, I'll give her a call, but, I was just wondering, so the test that you're referring to.
Yes, and she said she had been looking for this testing, data information, for probably 8-10 years,
Yeah.
something like that. I was glad to find it with about 10 minutes and send it to her right after that presentation, so.
Thank you.
Thank you all of you. I appreciate your attendance tonight and the information that you've given us all. Mr. Tyson.
Is Mr. Buckles there? Yeah.
No, not Rich Primary.
So we can do that first. That's fine. Thank you. Good evening. Good evening. I'm going to present to you the Mountain Ridge Primary School. And before I present all that, Brian's going to get a video of it so you can kind of get an idea of a fly through of what the Mountain Ridge Primary looks like. Some of the furniture that you see in this fly through is more of a general representation, unfortunately. So she didn't quite get what we wanted, but the school was accurate the way it looks.
So there will be improvements to the furniture.
Yeah, the furniture, remember, is going to be much improved. This is just a general representation. So we'll have you check this out first.
I think it was a furniture that when we saw some of this before that was presented.
It's probably, yes.
Okay.
This was in office, front office spaces, that sort of thing. Yeah, those are display cases. See off to the left. Remember, these are the monarchs, Mountain Ridge Primary Monarch. Those are like the pieces of those that also down in the cafeteria. After you pass the elevation lab, I think we'll move around and go back through that space. Just, you know, that's right across the cafeteria area. Going to the gymnasium, it's just a half court gymnasium. We didn't think it was necessary to go to full court since on this campus we already have the intermediate and middle school. I got courts in that. So this is going to take you into the innovation lab. Right? Now we're moving virtual to STEM themed other spaces. And it's not a fully integrated glass door system that accordion open, make it a collaborative space for the connection of the block. What I see here.
All you know is that it had the grade levels on the ones, the decoration. The classroom furniture here is another one, a lot more collaborative, like small groups, people come together a little easily, a little more old school traditional that.
But the ponies and the,
That was good.
Yeah, not as accurate. It's similar to what you saw at Tomahawk probably when you were there.
There was a sink in the classroom?
There's a sink in the classroom, yes.
Will it have seating that is, I guess, diverse, like bouncy balls and waffle bowls and stuff
That'll
like
be
that?
part of the, we have not gone through the furniture schedule yet, but that will be part of the proposals that we're gonna engage with two different furniture companies to
Okay.
sort of say, hey, here's our budget, now you impress us,
Yeah,
show us what you got. And so we've been working with Meteor and School Specialty around, they're both on cooperative purchasing to give us proposals on how we can best equip the school with furniture.
okay.
And it also didn't include the playground.
Right.
There was a concept.
They weren't able to get that in there either, unfortunately, but
That is,
we'll be coming back to you with that information because the playground would be a separate item that we'll need to get purchased. So we'll have some images and perhaps a rendering of that in a upcoming board meeting. So I give you a handout here of, these are all the contractors that bid on this school. And of course, you can probably notice, because I've sent you another handout, that the apparent low base bid winner was Warner Construction. The bid came in for the base bid of $23,593,700. And the base bid, I call it the base bid because that would be a total of 24 classrooms, 8 in each wing for kindergarten, first and second grade. So base bid, $23,593,700 to Warner Construction. Warner Construction, and you need a reminder, is also the company that is currently building the Hedgesville Early Learning Academy. And so some additional items to mention, there's an alternate that we put on this bid. Alternate number 1 was to make sure that our HVAC controls were the same system that we have throughout the entire district. It made sense for us, that was important to have the same controls that we have in all the other schools. So that was alternate number 1, came in at $0, by the way. So hopefully you'll approve alternate number 1. And then alternate number 2 is for additional classrooms. And the additional classrooms would be 2 on each wing for a total of 6. So if you decide tonight that you think we should add 6 additional classrooms for a total of 30 classrooms at Mountain Ridge Primary School, then that would be an additional cost of $1,383,200.
what will the, excuse me, but
Yeah.
what will that put the, capacity?
I'm going to give you that information here shortly as you are contemplating that decision.
Okay.
There are a few other items that need to be addressed.
Contemplate it before I get the figure.
Well, I like to keep you guessing a little bit.
I know.
The local water department, unfortunately has determined that, they are still determining the water pressure in this area. And so it's right at the borderline of not quite good enough. So we're still waiting on the final results for the water pressure issue on this end of the county. And if it's not quite where it should be, then we may have to add, like a water pump or something like that in order to make sure that this school building is up to code. So
and the pressure is more about water suppression.
it's more about the water suppression system, not like, flushing
Bringing balance
toilets
and flushing.
and operating the school on a general, everyday basis. But if there was an emergency and a fire suppression type of situation too, yes,
And
thank
so,
you.
and one of the things that, so it's not only maybe a pump, but it's also the size of the water storage tanks that they may have to be able to place, whether they be above ground, below ground, those sort of things. So that is probably something that could come as a change order, just because we didn't want the water issue to hold up the construction process, so.
And it's listed, on this pricing sheet to give you an estimated, cost if this were to be a problem.
What did he allocate for that? I think it was like,
Let's see. Yeah, it's supposed to be on here somewhere, and I don't remember where.
So the parent flow heaters, is it?
No, that's something different.
I think you put it in the contingency itself.
Yeah, I think it must be in the.
I think it's built in, I think.
I don't see it
was built in.
specifically listed, but it is included, like you said, probably within the contingency amounts.
What do you expect that cost might be if we have to get?
I think he told me it was 75,000. Was the contingency on that.
And I reading the cover letter from McKinley, the bid came in at 5.3 million under what we had budgeted.
Yes.
Oh, yes, that's correct.
Well, oh, wait a second, yeah.
Well,
That's a little bit, that is a,
yeah.
that,
You said 4 million.
one narrative could argue that, however, I want to be very transparent that I'm not in agreement with what that number is. Because in December, Mr. Butts and I sat down with McKinley to scope out the rest of the projects that are available in the bond. And based upon that conversation in December and their analysis of where certain bids might be coming in, we actually moved, and I want to make sure I say this correctly, I apologize. We moved $9.5 million to the Falling Waters project in order to cover the Falling Waters project, which lowered what we thought Mountain Ridge may cost. So it actually based upon our reallocation of some resources back in December for the remaining projects, this project is actually about 4 million over from where we had changed the budget back in December. So it's still based upon where current numbers are coming in at and where the budget had originally been planned for Mountain Ridge is still significantly less. I know that they're saying it's about $5 million less than what had.
That's deceptive.
Yeah, so I think that there were some numbers that were going back and forth in the planning process. So I just want to share that in order to be able to do or to do Falling Waters, we needed the additional $9 million based upon the change in scope on Falling Waters. So, however, I'm going to say that in my conversation with Mr. Butts and my analysis, I'm still very comfortable. I think that it's still a win what this came in at. But I think there was some confusion as to what was remaining and what we would end up having to have for this project compared to what we needed Falling Waters to come in at. And we're still working through that Falling Waters project, but with Mountain Ridge, we are over budget from what we were hoping it would be at. But it is within the scope of what policy 6200 will require from SBA. So, and in fact, I even had a conversation with Mr. Butts over the alternate 2, which is the additional classrooms. We agree that that's something that the board should seriously consider because it's needed. But it will change how much we're gonna have to come up with for Falling Waters.
This school will replace Inwood
And Jarrettstown,
and Jarrettstown.
yes.
Now, can you give me the capacity?
But I still have some more things to share with you. So,
Mr. Tyson, can you give her the capacity?
No, I'll just.
Almost at-
Wait,
Okay.
time out.
Yes.
I'll wait.
Michael and I are on the same page. This is replacing
And
Jarrettstown and, we were aware of Inwood. We did not.
It is replacing Jarrettstown.
Yeah, Jarrettstown and Inwood.
So Jarrettstown will also become, well, we don't know what's gonna happen with Jarrettstown, but Jarrettstown, that facility. But Jarrettstown and Inwood are both combining into Mountain Ridge primary, yes.
I don't remember that part of the planning when we were doing all that. I remember Inwood, I remember us talking specifically about Inwood. Don't
I'll say
remember-
Jarrettstown's well aware though, like they've.
Oh, I'm sure they are. I just, in all the realm of
Sure.
everything.
There have
I
been
don't
a
remember.
lot, there have been definitely a lot of things in this, but like, so, yeah, so this is, so like, for example, what is it?
What are we gonna do with that property?
Yeah, because we were.
Jarrettstown, we have yet to, through my transition, and talking with senior staff, there has been no decision made exactly on what will happen with Jarrettstown yet. And so that'll be something the board will have to determine.
I just to you, I remember Mr. Stevens taking a lot of interest in this particular school because his wife worked at Jarrettstown and he was. I mean, I'm not saying anything negative, I'm just saying, he was very particularly interested in this school because Inwood and Georgetown were gonna be.
I mean, they're close. They're very close, proximity, Jaredstown. And
Jaredstown obviously had, did you go to Jaredstown? Oh, okay. No, I'm not saying they don't have- I mean, obviously it has some logistical ADA, issues with multiple floors, and those sort of things, so. And I'm not sure how the decision was, is that Inwood would be the site for the pre-K compared to Jaredstown, for example, I'm not sure how that evolved.
I think
But-
because
but
of
this-
the age difference.
I think it was.
Farther out.
Yeah.
Well, it's on the main.
Main drag.
You two youngsters didn't realize that. I'm telling you that
You
young.
know what? You know what? There are things that others on this board have not remembered about the whole bond process, so I'm gonna say that this is where we fell down.
And Falling Waters, as an example, though, will, I mean, that's Marlowe. And Bennington, thank you.
Yeah,
So just for context there.
yeah, I remember that.
And also to alleviate Potomac's over.
It will definitely
Yes.
alleviate Potomac's, because that's just consolidating the primary. Because there's still a need for that intermediate, that's why that school will be close to 1,000 students, which is driving that cost up, obviously.
Now you can proceed.
Proceed, Todd.
Okay, so I had a few other items I just want to make sure I shared with you. One, of course, was the water issue. Second one is there is currently a traffic impact study that's happening for the Route 51 or Jaredstown Road. And it's likely that you're going to need to put a turning
Hey,
lane.
Brian, can you scroll down to the map so that he can highlight that to the board? Just keep on going, no, keep going south. Keep going,
Yeah, once you see Route 51,
keep going a little bit more.
it's likely that we're gonna need a turning lane, similar to what's in front of Mountain Ridge Intermediate right now. And so there is Mountain Ridge Intermediate and.
Actually, can he touch the screen and make move it? So you can scroll down and then to
Yeah,
the
put
left.
it down a little.
That's good, and then go to the left a little bit. There you go, thank you, that's perfect.
Okay, so right now, here is Mountain Ridge Intermediate, here is Route 51, Jaredstown Road. There's currently a turning lane into the Mountain Ridge Intermediate Middle School. But it'll have to be extended on further down so that we can have a turning lane into a new entrance that would also accommodate and improve Mountain Ridge Intermediate traffic flow. And if you keep on going.
Middle school.
Also to the middle school, and then it will connect all the way to the primary school. So there's a lot of road improvement that need to happen because of that. So you'll see one of the line items on there was a mention of that's what it's referring to.
But the turning lane would have to be on the highway.
Yeah, on Route 51.
And we don't know what that's gonna cost yet, because they're still doing that study, but that would be something we need to add. Well, we could either subcontract it ourselves or add it as an addendum to the contract with the contractor. But I wanna emphasize, this road will, and there was significant conversations with transportation. And their analysis of how many buses are gonna be stacked. But we're adding, if you'll look there, we're also adding parent parking lanes, so that parents
So
can start stacking.
off to the right-hand side, there'll be a place where parents can line up when they're doing drop off or pick up.
Pickup. And this road will also be built to be able to handle the capacity, for a future high school. So
Yeah,
that,
that's where it's going.
because this road will handle the future capacity of the high school.
Okay.
You'll have theoretically, the property that we own for the high school will be in the behind. This will be the road and the
Well, that-
improvements will be made to handle that.
Okay, perfect, that's where I was going.
We just.
First, actually scroll up, I guess.
North.
All right, so you can see it's gonna connect to that was the backside of the intermediate school. And then on further, it will connect to the middle school. You can also see.
And there's
all
enhancements to the middle school parking there too, or turning stuff as well.
And then improvement to additional lineup of traffic as it goes into the primary school, which is gonna sit behind the Mountain Ridge Middle School.
Where were the high school supposed to be?
On the hill.
If you look at where that,
Probably, probably over here to the left on top of this, it's a hillside basically.
I thought the road was going to come up there and then circle around in the back.
Well, the road continues, if you could bring the screen this way, you'll see, Mountain Ridge, you'll see Mountain Ridge.
Other way.
Other way.
You'll see Mountain Ridge Primary, it'll connect back over to Corner Sawmill.
Okay, that's what I
I
thought.
think that's what you're referring to.
Yeah,
And where does our property line end? There at the top?
Property line, let's see,
There's a little
bring
piece
this
of,
down, oh, we can't go any
yeah,
further. There's like there's approximately I think it's a 4 or 5 acre parcel right here, and then our property wraps around it.
Yeah.
So it goes probably another 150 yards, maybe, something like that.
something was gerrymandered there.
yeah,
Yeah, it was.
There's a total of 150 acres,
yeah.
and this is on one portion of that 150 acres.
Nice.
Yes,
If the DOH does a study, would there be a possibility of putting a light at Warner Sawmill potentially, or at the?
that is a great question. I think that maybe not for this project, but if we add the high school, it's likely that could maybe become a roundabout or like, yeah, I think that is, I think that is possible.
Well,
They
you
don't
know
have
that,
that,
you know that's gonna happen.
Alright, so that was my Jamestown Road information. Also, after everything was complete and they were about to meet with Warner Construction, they discovered that there were a couple of water heaters missing and a backflow preventer. So that also is included, in that listing of other items. And of course, items that we will need to purchase are the furniture, the, technology, smart boards or whatever we use, and of course, the, playground and playground equipment.
And that's and those things are budgeted.
And those are line items on, that sheet that I gave you.
The soft cost.
Now, what's it?
It's soft.
The soft cost, yes, the soft. All right, so I chatted up the numbers right here.
Oh, my
look at
goodness.
that. Special, I don't worry.
Oh.
This is the projected enrollment for 2026. 358 students likely is what will open the school with. Not this August, but next August. The base bid of 24 classrooms will accommodate 508 students. If you choose to add the 6 additional classrooms, that'll bring the maximum enrollment to 648. I refer to the demographic study that was just completed in December by Preston Smith. I need to give a shout out to Brad Spinagle. He helped me to interpret the data. And the projected enrollment for this Mountain Ridge Primary School 2030, projected enrollment, that's only like 5 years from now, 391. And projected enrollment 2035, 424. So hopefully those numbers kind of give you an idea of what we're looking at. And that is the projected enrollment. You know how you've looked at that study, and there were 3 lines of enrollment projections. This is the high line that I put these numbers from.
So do you actually think we need this?
No,
I was gonna say, I don't think.
I don't think Tim and I had that, I don't think we had that conversation. We had that, he was just saying that if we needed to, then he would recommend it, but that
I don't think.
clearly does not dictate that we need that
I
alternative,
don't think so. but
In fact,
that's your
we just got a
decision.
little wiggle.
which is nice.
Yeah, for a change.
Any other questions for, Mr. Tyson?
Oh, I did want to point out one thing on the page with the breakdown. You have Mountain Ridge Elementary. I don't know if that matters or not, but I'd want you to turn that in somewhere.
Oh, gotcha, yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah, we can fix that before it's reviewed by the SBA. This of course is an SBA project as well. Thank you.
I still think we're.
So you're approving the base bid and then also the alternate number 1, technically the HVAC controls. That's what we're waiting on.
So, the pleasure is the base bid at $23,593,000. $23,593,700. And for alternate 1, which is the HVAC controls, and we are not approving alternate 2, or what is your pleasure?
So how many, I was up riding, Sulphur Spring Road the other day. And I saw a lot of dirt moving for a subdivision. And I'm just worried about these projected numbers by the Smith Group. there's still a lot of development going on there.
A lot of development, but not a lot of kids. I mean, what we heard previously was younger people moving in and,
They're
retirees.
Yeah, retirees or those who have already gotten, their kids are out of school.
I don't wanna over.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just worried about the reliability of the study and those numbers.
It is easy to add on. The way that we've got it structured is, it is easy to add on. So if in, let's say, 5 years, there looks like we're gonna be far exceeding that, there can be a different conversation. I know that's only 5 years from now, and that seems like a short amount of time, but from what we're looking at with these studies, I don't know how we justify
Okay, so the.
building in space.
The base bid will cover 500 students. We're at 358 now. And we'll.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
How much is affordable right now?
One classroom or 140,000 approximately.
So we're getting, if you 6 classrooms, around 200,000. Right?
6 classrooms is a million.
One point
He's breaking it down by classroom. You had about, for example, 6 portables.
Or 230,000. So I'm just like the longevity of what we're, like, I'm not, like, I'm thinking like 15 years from now, I might not be on board.
That's a then problem.
Yeah, just trying to, like, we're so against portables and we have an opportunity to build, 6 classrooms for, the price of a portable, each for standalone structure. I think it's worth the investment. So, I mean, I'll move to approve alternate 2.
You jumped in there, spent. You want to add 6 classrooms.
Yes. This longevity of just this, like the historic factor of that we use our school buildings to the extent that we do now. And this overcapacity of our schools now. Yeah, we don't know really what the numbers are gonna be at this point.
Just also wanna make sure,
Knowing the. What's in the planning commission's hands right now.
there's
I'll
two
second
hundred
the
and,
motion just to have debate.
there's 200 and, if we go max, right? And do the alternate,
It's 200 extra kids.
that's 224
Extra students.
extra student space that we're not occupying, potentially. That's awful lot.
Cooling that area. We're heating
Yeah.
and cooling that area, there's no students in there.
If I could add another, just not to complicate the discussion, but the SBA looks at 80% utilization as being at, I'm sorry, is it 85? 85 at capacity. So you're building something for 508 at 358. I'm not sure what that percentage is, but you're probably getting pretty close to what the SBA would consider is full utilization.
431, well, actually 432.
432 would be 85.
Yeah,
So, okay, so you're about 75 or so students away from that, but, if you think about the growth and also the Preston Smith study talked about, the district boundaries being changed for those schools. Nothing says that if the school is built larger, that it doesn't affect how we want to move some of those boundary lines also to maximize the utilization if we were to go over in, if we were to add that on, add those additional classrooms on. I think it also takes into account for potentially other special ed classrooms that we might want to add at some point. If we, for that area, it gives us greater flexibility to do those things. So I don't think there's any wrong answer here. Obviously, $1.3 million in the grand scheme of things, to add classrooms, I think is absolutely a very good investment. But if we save it, it's going to be added to the Falling Waters project or Inwood or what have you.
which is sorely needed
Yeah, well,
and
that's
is
my,
over budget.
that's my, concern is that those dollars could be definitely added to Falling Waters because we're gonna need it.
And that's a need it now versus a possibly need it later. And we would be building to a possibly need it. And I struggle with the we need it now versus possibly need it in the future. I hear what you're saying and you're not wrong. It's just,
It's hard to, well,
Give a motion.
yeah, somebody.
well, he motioned
Yeah,
to.
And second it.
I second it, so we could.
So we need to vote.
favor of-
Well, just one other thing.
You can't have one other thing.
Two other things, so I'll just run down. We will have Jaredstown there if the building, if we were to have a sudden growth spurt there in the Inwood area.
We don't know what we're doing with that building yet, so
Yeah, that's what I'm
that
saying.
needs to be a conversation.
Well, but that's a conversation that would definitely could be used for that if that occurred, but you can't keep it shut down forever and then
No,
decide you're gonna open up a school.
but I think that needs to be a conversation that we have sooner rather than later.
Mr. Martin, I think with the 140 students past the, when we built the building, I think we have a cushion here for the growth. And I just worried about the numbers being kind of low because I think the growth would be greater than what they're projecting.
That's my worry. I just don't want what previously the board has done for, not looking at growth, in this county. I just don't want us to build another, just 10 years, no, like we're just kicking the can down the road at this point. If we just don't build for growth, then that's what I'm worried about. And then you hear about our portables left and right, so I'm just trying to get ahead of that now, as we have a good opportunity to build, just more classrooms and actual one facility.
But the need for 1.3 million is a greater need for the Marlowe school, because we have to alleviate the size of Potomac. As well as consolidating two elementary schools.
Because
I just want to make sure we have a chance to debate your motion.
the bottom line is we're gonna have to redistrict.
Yeah, that is true.
So, we're looking at, the numbers the way the lines fall now. It's not a pleasant thing, but we're definitely gonna have to redistrict. So, we have a motion and a second, all in favor of,
I'd like to just restate what the motion probably just intended to be, and that is that the board approved Warner Construction as the contractor for the new Mountain Ridge primary with the base bid of 24 classrooms and also accepting alternate 1 and alternate 2 for an additional cost of $1,383,200,000.
$1,383,200.
Thank you, yes.
yeah, you alternate two in there.
Yeah, that's.
Well, that's the motion.
That is the motion.
That is
That is
the
the
motion.
motion.
Okay. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Opposed?
Nay.
The motion has died, so we'll have a second motion to approve, Warner, construction, for the Mountain Ridge Primary School, the low bidder at bid price for 24 classrooms, $23,593,700. And for the HVAC, alternate 1 at no cost. Which total, what I just said, $23,593,700. Have a motion, second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay.
Now, on to the, summer HVAC project change order.
Yes, so, and I think it was January, I presented to you, essentially 4 projects for HVAC upgrades. That would be the Hedgesville Middle School Gymnasium to become a conditioned space. Musselman Middle School Gymnasium, the same. Hedgesville High School Auxiliary Gym, same. And then 10 classrooms at Martinsburg High School. And it was approved at that board meeting for a total of $3 million for CMTA to do that work this summer. Since that time, 3 additional HVAC systems have failed at Martinsburg High School, and they need replaced. So there also were a couple of other factors that changed the price. Those factors are as CMTA listed, the timing of contractors already booked for summer, increase of 10% in wages, sheet metal piping material costs also went up, and they mentioned general issues around tariffs that are hitting their suppliers and is causing pricing inflation. So I'm coming tonight with a change order, asking if we do the same project, of course, but adding the 3 additional classrooms in Martinsburg for a total of 13, plus the additional pricing that they have mentioned here. Instead of $3 million, it would bring the total to $3,310,000. And that is essentially the change order request. I have a representative, Eric Hasselwander from CMTA, on this call in case you would happen to have any questions that he could probably address more specifically than I can. And
I also just want to add that when we had asked for approval of the 3 million, that was giving CMTA the authorization to go ahead and start moving in that direction, even though they knew that they still had to do some bidding in order to refine what we were going to be able to do because of supply order. They were concerned with supply chain issues. So I want to say that if the board was not to approve the additional, we're still getting the 10 classrooms in those gyms, correct?
correct.
Thank you.
I have a motion to accept the change order of $3,310,000 for the summer HVAC projects previously approved at Martinsburg High School, and the addition of the $3 million for the 3 classrooms.
So
The addition of 3 HVAC for the 3 classrooms.
oh, okay.
Yeah, there were 10 classrooms that were either failing or almost, and now there are 3 additional in that same wing.
So it's not
And
$6 million, it's
so there-
still
it's
$3
still
million,
$3
it's just
million,
the addition of
310,000. It's an additional 310,000, which will include those additional 3 classrooms.
Yes.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Questions. Eric? Eric, are we gonna be seeing change orders because of the tariffs for existing projects?
That's a great question. I haven't seen on any of the bids that we received, except for one contractor who was not the lower bid. So, though nobody has included any language in their bids to include anything about tariffs. So really, I think for the most part, contractually, I don't know that they have the opportunity to ask for more money in that case. And I think that's part of why the prices were already higher to begin with, and why we're asking for a little bit more money was because I think they're trying to cover themselves for that.
Hey, and the supply chain issues, is that more involved around electrical components?
It is also for things like rooftop units and larger HVAC equipment. So I think the supply chain issues that were kind of referenced were around the fact that we've already ordered some of the equipment for this project. But then the remaining equipment, some of the smaller fan coils and things that are lower lead time, we still have to go ahead and order. And in that batch of that order, that would include the extra 3 classrooms. So in this kind of time constraint, like now would be the time we need to go ahead and order those, and we just need to know if we need to do it for 13 classrooms or for 10.
Will the high school be ready to run from August?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second, and I have, all in favor of the $3,310,000, $3,310,000 $3,310,000, for the change order, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now, I had asked Dr. Sachs to give us a virtual, well, it's a rendition of the, which might show where the 200 feet is taken off of that. I just go learn my academy.
Yeah, so I just shared with you some copies there. It was what I talked about at the last board meeting where we're dealing with an easement issue at the Hedgesville Early Learning Academy. So I gave you a copy just so you can kind of see the line of the easement that slices through that corner of the building. And then the angled rendering to give you a better view of how that building will be slightly reconfigured to not be within the easement. So just want to make sure you had a copy of that. That was just a follow-up from the last discussion at the previous board meeting.
So where is this?
Right there, that's the 250 right here. So you just don't see the change in the building.
Okay, all right.
That's the original building.
Yeah, that's the original building showing you how that corner was impacted.
Yeah, this is where it's all.
Yes,
Well, my concern is what's it gonna look like?
that's the,
And that's this.
that's that,
It's gonna look exactly like that.
exactly like that,
Okay,
yes.
well, that's.
Okay,
Another time?
that's it.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, the next thing on the agenda is the, property, request for the, property that we're adding on to, Inwood Primary School at $210,000. And we might need to go into executive session to discuss it. We've already discussed it.
Well, if I can present just a summary of it, and if the board wants to discuss anything in executive session, I'm willing to do that. I'll make myself available. But this is 1.82 acres, which sits directly behind Inwood Primary, right behind the playground. There's approximately, I think there's 11 acres back there that is slated for some development for, I think, some warehousing and some storage buildings. And so we have asked the owner for 1.82 acres, which would allow us to not have to wait for Mountain Ridge Primary to open up in order to begin our work on the new Inwood Early Learning Academy. And the new Inwood Learning Academy was slated to not begin construction until Mountain Ridge opened up, so that they could raise the building and build the new facility. That's obviously going to be, 2.5 years from now. And so what this allows us to do is to be able to take advantage of the timeliness of where costs are and being able to expend those bond dollars in a quicker manner than having to delay. And it will also help us address the overcrowding of our schools by being able to open up these 12 pre-K classrooms much sooner. Because what this will allow us to do is be able to build the new building at the site while students are still attending the current Inwood Primary School. So again, this allows us to open up the new Inwood Early Learning Academy 2 years ahead of schedule. And so I would encourage the board to consider the purchase of this 1.82 acres in the amount of $210,000.
I have a motion, to allow Dr. Sachs to enter into a purchase agreement with, regarding the 1.82 acres, behind Inwood Primary at a cost of $210,000.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Dr. Spooley.
Good evening, President Long, members of the board, Superintendent Sachs. The personnel actions dated for today, Tuesday, April the 15th, 2025, are as follows. We begin with 2 unpaid coaching appointments and 1 interim appointment. We have 1 resignation of a coach. We have 3 new healthcare procedure appointments and the appointment of a 1/7 planning period purchase. We have 5 new professional appointments And included in that on line 14 is the appointment of the remaining deputy superintendent of instruction leadership service with Dr. Matthew Woods, and he's here with us this evening. We have two new assignments, a professional, or change of assignments for professional personnel. One policy 5,000 assignment, two resignation of professional personnel, one retirement of a professional personnel after nearly 32 years of experience. Moving to the service side, we have one new appointment on the service side, two corrections of titles for previous board agendas, four new midday appointments, one service retirement of 26 years, and two new substitute teacher appointments, and one rescinding of appointment of substitute teacher for a total only of 30 professional service coaching substitute personnel actions dated for today, Tuesday, April the 15th, 2025, with the superintendent's recommendation.
Can I have a motion to accept the personnel actions as presented?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Just could you name the 32-year to 27?
Yes.
Yeah, they're on there.
I did.
I can read.
I didn't.
The professional retirement with 32 years of experience is Brenda Watersworth from Musselman High School science teacher. And then on the service side,
Cindy Gold, Cindy Gold.
Cynthia Galt, yes, bus operator.
Anything else?
I'd like to move that we actually go into executive session to discuss, line 14.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We'll go into executive session. Well, let's put on the rest of them. What's your pleasure? Yeah, we'll remove line 14 and then vote on all the other personnel actions.
Fine.
Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We will be back out. Your time is 8:35. Session at something,
Now, 8:59.
8:59. Move us from executive session, and we have one item on the table, and that is to vote on personnel action lines 14.
I move we accept line 14.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Adjourn.